We are keeping ourselves from a destiny that we signed up for. Whatever you need will begin to show up. The problem with most of us is that as it begins to show up, we then institute the thing that keeps us from formalizing and manifesting and creating the destiny that we signed up for. It's why I say to you with absolute certainty, when you have the passion, just the presence of the passion and nothing more, that's all you need, just the presence of it, is a guarantee for you that you have the capacity to manifest it, attract it, and create it in whatever form you would like it to show up. Just because you have the passion. And the Tao doesn't teach you to think big. It teaches you to think small. Thinking big is a mistake, according to the Tao. Because when you think big, you can't get big things done. We can only do things in this moment. So it teaches us to be in this moment. It says you can get anywhere from here. It's really simple. You go through what you have to go through, even the torturous things that you have to go through, in order to be able to give. Because the most important thing that you can learn, according to Lao Tzu, is that when you are at one with what is called the hidden virtue, which is the hidden godliness, kindness, goodness, love that is in you and what you came from, when you are in harmony with that, all of your life is about giving. When you're not in harmony with the hidden virtue, all of your life is about getting. So you make the shift from getting, what's in it for me, how much am I going to make, how well am I going to do, what does my ego say, to how may I serve, what may I give, how can I do it.
Enjoy.
So I want to share with you what has been happening in my life in the last year. It's been a magical year. It's been a transformative year. And I got involved in doing something that not only produced a book, which I completed 2 days ago, but more than it being another book that I've written, it was something that allowed me to see the incredible power of passion and enthusiasm. And when you get it in your hearts, and my objective in the short time that I have here with you today is to convey that to you. What you need, what you're supposed to do, how it will work out, what financing is required, what people you'll need, what circumstances you will need to align with the stars or whatever, all will be taken care of if you stay with your passion. And I'd like to suggest to you that whatever your passion is, and even if you don't know what it is, whatever the feeling you have inside of you that says to you, this is what you're here for, you have to do this. As absurd as it may sound, as ridiculous as it may appear to everyone in your environment, including your husband and your children and your wife and your ex-wife and your grandchildren and your neighbors and the people you work with and the people you encounter everywhere you go. It may sound like the most absurd thing for someone of your age at this time, given these circumstances of your life, to be even contemplating something so crazy, whatever it might be. And yet, if you can hold on to the passion, just hold on to that. Hold on to the passion. What you're doing when you're holding on to the passion is you're holding on to God. Because the word enthusiasm and passion are the same. And theos from the Greek is God. Yasm means within. Enthusiasm is the God within you. The God within you. And this voice, if you read the 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace I put out for my children several years ago. I wrote it for my teenagers because I put down in there the 10 most significant and important ideas that I thought they should know long after I was gone. One of those ideas was the second one. It's called Don't Die with Your Music Still in You. That you came here with music to play. So not dying with your music still in you is a very important idea. It's one of 10 that I carried with me for a long time and wrote it so that they would have it and be able to read that and know what I was speaking about. But beyond that is something that I have come to know, and that is when you have that passion and you hang on to it and you don't let any obstacle come in your way, you're hanging on to God. And another synonym for God is love, right out of the New Testament. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. So now we're looking at enthusiasm being something, or passion being something that relates to your staying connected to a field of energy that is dominated by something called love, and that is God itself. And we all have this wonderful choice as we come into this world. And the choice is whether we're going to stay aligned with that or not. The writing that I have been doing is from something called the Tao Te Ching. Now the Tao Te Ching, T-A-O, it's pronounced D, but it's Tao. The Tao Te Ching, the Great Way, was dictated, I should say, 2,500 years ago. It's the longest surviving spiritual text on our planet and the most sales of any other thing other than the Bible, the Tao Te Ching. And very few of us know very much about it, but you will. It's interesting because it was written and created at the very same time as the Bhagavad Gita, 2,500 years ago. Buddha, Lao Tzu were contemporaries, as was Confucius, and Zoroaster, Socrates. All of these beings were walking on the planet at the same time. It was a vortex, an intellectual, spiritual vortex. Not long after people were just crawling out of caves, 2,500 years ago. Remember, we think of the Middle Ages. That was 1,200 or 1,300 years later. And this was 500 years. 500 years. 5 centuries before the birth of Christ. This man who lived at God consciousness, at God realization, was dictating to a guard, they say, as he was leaving his village in ancient China, and he gave these verses, and there are 81 of them. 8-1. Infinite source. Once. 81. Bhagavad Gita, being written at the same time, has 18 verses in it. One infinite source. And there are 18 holes on a golf course. I mean, how do you put that all together? There's got to be a connection there. There's got to be. So these 81 verses, I got this idea, and I never know where the next thing is going to come from. And it's why I say to you with absolute certainty, when you have the passion, just the presence of the passion, and nothing more, that's all you need, just the presence of it, is a guarantee for you that you have the capacity to manifest it, attract it, and create it in whatever form you would like it to show up. Just because you have the passion. Because it's a knowing within you. And when you stay with it and align yourself with it, the book you have to write, the music you have to create, the artwork that you have to do, the child that you absolutely must adopt, the business that you have to open up someplace out there that no one else understands or grasps, the thing that won't go away, when you keep it there, when you stay aligned with it, and you keep that alignment in harmony with God, with Spirit, whatever you need will begin to show up. The problem with most of us is that as it begins to show up, we then institute the thing that keeps us from formalizing and manifesting and creating the destiny that we signed up for. Things like doubts. Shakespeare said, our doubts are our traitors. These are traitors. These are things that we live with and we hang on to and we spout and we talk about, and we don't realize that in just the most innocuous and innocent of ways, we are keeping ourselves from a destiny that we signed up for long before we ever entered into this world of form. So I was in England about 1.5 years ago. I was lecturing over there. And a friend of mine in the United States, one of my best friends, told me about a book that he thought I should read. He said, it's so well written and it's so impactful. I think you should read it. And then I kept seeing, this is what happens. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity, or synchrodestiny, as Deepak calls it. And it's this idea that there's a sort of a collaboration with fate that begins to take place when we stay connected to and attached to our passion. Not to how it'll happen, Not to if it'll happen, not to when it will happen, but just to it. We just stay there. And then we get into that state of bewilderment and awe. And as we stay in that state of bewilderment and awe, we start seeing a change take place. I call this book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao Te Ching. And it's 81 essays that I channeled from Lao Tzu. And, I say that and I think, ooh, but you know what? I'm 66. It's going to get a little weird now in these last... And when it does, I'm going to point it out so that you don't think I don't know that it's a little weird that I'm channeling a 2,500-year-old Chinaman. But I want to tell you how this happened and then end with something that's, I can't even wait to give you what's going to happen in the last hour. I can hardly wait to get to that one. It's so good. But I got to go through this first. This is even better. So the book was called A Million Little Pieces. Many of you saw it, know about it. It became a huge bestseller. This was before anybody had spoken anything about it, James Fry. And then this huge controversy came up about a memoir and whether all the facts were straight. And he was a drug addict. He was addicted to heroin. He was addicted to crack cocaine. He was drinking 2 or 3 bottles of vodka a day. He was 27 years old. He was days away from death. He was dumped off at... up in Minnesota, a place called Hazleton, and went into rehab. And he wrote his account, looking back on it from 18 years of sobriety, looking back on it. And some of the facts were shifted and changed. And as one of my children said, he was a drug addict, and he exaggerated. Is that a big surprise? And the whole controversy that emerged on this subject and so on overshadowed the importance of this book and this man and what it did for so many people whose lives were just ripped out from under them with drugs, prescription drugs, illegal drugs, legal drugs, whatever. It's a huge, huge problem we face in our society today. And it isn't just illegal drugs. It's like you're getting bombarded every day on television, on the radio, on Time Magazine, full-page ads, USA Today, whatever, with more and more and more inclinations to go to your physician and tell them which drugs that you want. And they are invested in the drug companies, and the drug companies are making billions of dollars and charging $10 for a pill that costs a penny. And then the chances of getting an erection that lasts 4 hours that's very real in there, There's got to be a lot of sexual dysfunction in this country because there's a commercial every 2 minutes, isn't there? I don't know. If I have an erection that lasts 4 hours, going to my doctor is the last place I'm heading. I'm telling you that right now. I have several stops I want to make before I show up at doctor's house. So I read this book, and I was fascinated by it. Being a camel myself. A camel is an animal who starts out every day on his knees. He goes to bed every night on his knees. And he goes 24 hours without a drink. I've been a camel for 19 years now. I go to bed and wake up. And addiction is something I'm very, very, very familiar with. Very much of an addictive personality. I started running in 1976. I ran 8 miles. When I finally got to 8 miles. And then it was 1998. It was 22 years later, and I was still running 8 miles every single day for 22 years. Some call it obsessive, some call it addictive, and I've been down that road with things like nicotine and things like alcohol and drugs and caffeine and sugars and things like that have all been things in my own life that I showed up to. And one of the things I've come to know is that everything that you have to deal with, every problem that you face, every struggle you have to overcome, whatever it might be, as the Tao teaches, it has good fortune is hidden in all misfortune. You have to know that. And that the way that the Tao works is that nothing sustains itself the same. So that every storm that shows up in your life, every storm that shows up in the world has calmness hidden within it. And has a drought hidden within it as well. And it's the way of things. The only constant is the Tao. But the problem with the Tao is, as it says in the first chapter, is that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So you can't talk about it. You have to just experience it. You have to go within and come to know that there is a constant. There is an energy. There is a force from which all things originate. All things originate, including you. And particles themselves do not create more particles. So you didn't come from a particle. You came from an energy field that allowed a particle to formulate in a split second called creation. That's the way of Tao. And returning to Tao, verse 40 of the Tao Te Ching says that returning is the way of Tao. Returning is the way of Tao. Returning and yielding. Your job is to return to the place from which you originated. Now some, including the poets, suggest that the only way to do that is through death. T.S. Eliot, the great, he's actually born in St. Louis. I don't know if most of you knew that. In 1888. Died in 1965 at the age of 77. Said, we shall cease from exploration. And at the end of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring shall be to return to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. He's suggesting in that poetic offering for which he won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948, he's suggesting in there that the only way you'll ever know it is to die. You'll return to the place from which you came, and at your death you will know where you came from in that originating place and know it for the first time. Now, I don't like to argue with T.S. Eliot or Lao Tzu, but I would suggest that we can return and enter into a state of God realization and harmonize ourselves with Tao now and activate it and create it. And in the process, gain all that the originating force allowed or intended us to become, which is what we signed up for before we came. It's possible now, and I'll be talking a little bit later about how to access it and what happens when you do. For now, when you read, or if you do read A Million Little Pieces, you discover that this young man in his 20s, when he went into this rehab facility to overcome something that when people reach that level of addiction, very few ever survive it. People who do crystal meth, they say they have 6 out of 100 recover from it. 94 end up dying. And that's an epidemic where I live on Maui. It's called ICE. 6 out of 100 is the success rate. 94 are going to continue taking it. They're going to get something called meth mouth, which means your teeth turn to the consistency of a peach and fall out and your body deteriorates. And that stuff is out there. And that's just one. So he was doing that as well. But something happened to him in there, and he had a much bigger assignment, if you will, or sign up. Because while he was in this rehab facility, he refused to do the things that the program prescribed for him. He wouldn't do the AA thing. He didn't do the 12 steps. He thought that he didn't want to substitute one kind of addiction for another. He found himself putting it all down, being very resistant to any kind of authority, being very much like the kind of behavior that probably got him going in that whole world of addiction in the first place. But what he did do every day is read the Tao Te Ching, the 81 verses, which you can read in about 81 minutes. It only takes a minute to read a verse of the Tao Te Ching, and then you can study any one of them for a lifetime, as you'll hear a little bit later on. So as I would read through this thing and see him resisting the first step and the second step and not going to meetings and not doing any of the things and being very just resistant to any kind of authority, but he kept saying, the Tao, the Tao. And all this time, while I was reading it, I knew about the Tao. I knew about Lao Tzu. I sort of had a vision of what he looked like, and based on paintings and renderings that had survived over centuries. But I had never really studied it. I taught a course in philosophy at a university back in the 70s, and I would do one lecture on Taoism, just sort of skim through it and get on to the real stuff, you know. Because the Taoists don't believe in a God that is a white, dead male in heaven floating around as a cosmic bellboy who is going to offer you, if you pray hard enough, to something outside of you. As Carl Jung, who was a Taoist, said that the surest way to lose your soul is to believe in a God that exists outside of yourself. The surest way to lose your soul. He also said that the purpose of organized religion is to prevent as many people as possible from having a direct experience of God. A direct experience. A knowing God. So the Tao doesn't teach about knowing about God. The Tao teaches about knowing God. And the Tao sees God in nature and in yourself and in all things, inescapably connected to all things, the source of all creation. It does nothing, but it leaves nothing undone. Doing nothing and leaving nothing undone is a wonderful paradox. Try it sometime. I've been doing that, even in my swim in the morning on the ocean in the Pacific. I've been practicing swimming by doing nothing, but just letting my body do what it knows how to do. Just letting it move through the water without my having any effort and just watching. Good example of it right now is there's, 1,500, 2,000 people in this room? There's not one person in here who's beating his heart or her heart. And yet every heart is being beaten. So the Tao teaches all of us that you're doing nothing. You're just being done. You're in the process of being done by a force that is handling everything for you and handled it from the very beginning. Very interesting, because the first 9 months of your life, from the moment of conception until the moment of birth, in those first 9 months, you totally stayed out of the picture. And so did everybody else. It's just, you totally surrendered. You just let go, as they say in the recovery movement. You let go, and what? You let God. You just let God. So you didn't have a nose when they took a little picture in there, but you didn't go through, praying, oh God, please deliver me a nose, and don't put a bump on it, and don't make it look to this or to that. And you handled, everything got handled in exactly divine timing, divine perfection. And you just let go. And so did your mother. You just let go. And allowed. And allowed. And it all happened. And then you were born. And you said, good work, God. I'll take over from here. And so did your parents. And all of your neighbors and your culture will take over. Nice work. And the moment that you did that, you made your biggest mistake. And the Tao, myself here today, teaching about how to get back to that place of doing nothing, but leaving nothing undone. Allowing rather than resisting. Not fighting. So synchronicities begin to happen when the passion is there. And I had finished this book on inspiration and this brand new book about balance called Being in Balance, which has just come out. I'm so proud of, about aligning ourselves and staying connected to our source and keeping a balance between our habits and what we desire. And as always, it's when you have the passion and when you know you're being used, when you start realizing that you're being done, like your body's being done, you know that. I mean, this is a city that has the largest number of plastic surgeons per capita than any city in the world. Yeah, right here, Scottsdale, Arizona. There's one right across the street when I was running this morning. About 400 doctors in there. But you can plasticize everything in your body. It doesn't make any difference. It's still being done. And it's going to leave in divine timing. Exactly when it was supposed to. There's absolutely nothing for you to be concerned about. In the moment of your conception, in the moment of your movement from spirit to form, your birth was handled. Your height was handled. The color of your eyes was handled. Everything that you needed, your body structure, was all handled for you. In the microscopic dot on a pin, you can put 1 billion of these. That's how tiny it was. And everything you needed for this journey was all handled in there. Your death must have been in there if your birth was in there, isn't it? I mean, it's just all, you're just being done. And if you could be done by staying in rapport with the source from which you originated and know it for the first time, really know it, the ability to be able to attract, manifest, provide what it is that you are here for would become something which would keep you bewildered. It would keep you in a state of awe. You would see it forming. Now, reading 1 million little pieces, and I was in England, and I picked it up, and I set it down, and then I said, no, I don't want to carry it through because, it was heavy, and it was before it was in paperback, and I wasn't sure. And then I get back, and somebody had sent me a copy, and then I was sort of thumbing through it, and I gave it to somebody to read, and my children started reading it, and I sent it to one of my daughters who struggles with addictions even to this day, dramatically. In fact, she's right now working on her total sobriety. I've just talked to her half an hour ago, and You can't imagine how much peace there is in knowing that someone is safe in a place being helped and wanting to do it, checking herself in. So, and then the author appears on a television show that I happen to be flipping through, and then, it's like it just keeps coming at you as if to say, I got something for you to do, and you already signed up to do it a millennia ago, or 2,000 millennia ago. How do I get your attention? You got to do it, because unless you just keep saying, no, I can't do that, or it won't work, or I don't have the ability, or I don't have the luck, or these kinds of things have never worked out for me before, or whatever it might be, those things that we call resistance begin to become our mode of dealing with it, and before you know it, resistance is what we start believing in, and then we start believing in our limitations, and we start arguing for them, and defending all the reasons why it can't happen, when all you have to do is be in love. All you have to do is be in love. All you have to do is stay in love. Stay in that place of ecstasy, and then just watch. Just watch. And you'll see it showing up in so many ways. I was still not knowing what this was about. I don't have a drinking problem. It's been 19 years. All right, that's recover. Okay, that's not still working on it. All right, that's not an issue. It's not even a possibility for me. But there it was. And the only thing that kept this man, who was destined to die in a few short months, from going back to it was the Tao Te Ching. Stephen Mitchell's version of the Tao Te Ching, who's an American. So I was thinking about it, and every time I talked to my friend, he would tell me about this, and you got to read this. And I said, read, I got so many other things I'm working on. And he said, you got to read this. I said, why are you bugging me, telling me what I got to read, Do you know what I'm talking about? This is just my experience, but you get these. These things are happening to you now. Even being here, even something I might have said, or something, whatever it might be already. Somebody's here who didn't even know they were going to be here this morning and still don't even know who I am. And you may be wondering, what am I doing here? And when's it going to get to the point? And what's what? And the point is, you're here. And there's no accidents in this universe. There's an organizing intelligence that's supporting everything. The whole thing is all held together. That same force that's beating every heart in this room is holding the planet in alignment with all the rest of them, and opening the flowers and closing them, and providing us with the trees and the food. And it's like the whole thing is all being done. And so I accepted a speaking engagement out in Wyoming, which I didn't want to take, last summer. In September, I guess a year ago last September, to speak for some Grand Teton conference or something out there. And I was speaking. I was in England, in fact, and when I left England, I told the woman that kept calling me, a lot like these two here, like Liz and Mother, giving me wonderful people, and I mean that. I said, look, I'm flying in from England, and then I've got to go to Wyoming, and I said, there's no flights for that, and I was, using all the things. I said, it's just not possible. I simply just can't go there. She said, there's no problem with that. We'll send a plane. Her sister's married to Oscar de la Renta, okay, who likes the sister as much as his wife. And so we'll send Oscar de la Renta's plane to you, and we'll pick you up. And I said, no, you don't understand. My daughter has got to, I don't do it unless she goes with me. And he said, that's no problem. She can get on the plane too, and then we'll fly her back to where there we were, flying across the country on this private plane, landing in Jackson Hole, and going off to this Grand Teton thing. And I get the talk, and that night, I met a woman who was also speaking the next morning and doing a workshop at the same conference. Her name is Byron Katie. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She's a wonderful, wonderful being, one of my all-time favorite human beings on the planet. And I was going through some particular difficulty at that time, family and stuff, and when I finished my talk, about 11, she stayed up with me till almost 3 o'clock in the morning and worked with me doing something called the work. Her whole idea is that we have all of these thoughts. We have so many thoughts that we have every single day. The only problem is that most of them are not true. In fact, hardly any of them are. And yet we act as if they are, and we live by these truths that he must love me, and you must do this, and things must be that way, and none of them are true. The opposite is just as likely to be true of almost every thought that you have as the thought that you have. And she shows you how to do that in something called the work. Now we've put together a program together. I spoke with her out in Pasadena for an all-day workshop. They're putting it out, and we're like very, very close friends. So I'm talking to her, and she said, my husband is here with me. And I said, oh, what's his name? Oh, his name is Stephen Mitchell. I said, oh, really? Yeah, she's married to the guy who translated the Tao Te Ching. All right? So I said, enough. You know, in Hawaii, they have this thing, it's called, enough already. That's how they talk, right? So I said, so I began reading through it, and then I saw the whole controversy, and I just felt that he didn't get a fair shake there. You know, I really, I think when you have a choice to be right or to be kind, like picking kind is really important, and he made a big mistake by not having a disclaimer at the beginning that some of the facts had been changed. But the man had helped so many people, and you know what? After I read it, I picked up the phone because his publisher had dropped him, and I said, look, I talked to Louise Hay, who's my publisher, and I said, you know, they're going to drop this guy from publishing, and she said, whatever he wants to publish, we'll publish, and we'll pay them whatever he was being paid. That's Louise. So I called, I got his number from Stephen. He had also forgotten to give credit to Stephen for the Tao Te Ching quotes throughout the Million Little Pieces, but he didn't know. He didn't know. And as soon as he found out, he corrected it, which he was willing to do with everything else as well. He's such a decent, really good, beautiful human being. And I called him, and I told him about my daughter, who was in rehab and was struggling with addictions and all of that. And he said, what's her name? And I said, look, if you just talk to her for 5 minutes, just for 5 minutes, because she read your book, it would mean so much to me, so much. And he said, I'll talk to her for 5 hours or 5 days, or I'll move in with her for 5 weeks, if that's what it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to help her. And he did, and called her and encouraged her to stop the bullshit, as he said, stop all of the excuses and get on with your sobriety. And it made a huge impact in her life. So you can imagine I'm a bit of a fan. So this thing from this, called the Tao Te Ching, which he told me, he said, I read it every day. And each day when I read it, it was the only thing that got me through it, because I fought all the rest of it. And I thought, if somebody can be in that state where they're so close to death, and something written 2,500 years ago by a little Chinaman who just gave this to a guard and dictated it and said, these are the essential truths of life, and live them. I said, I've got to get into this thing. I've got to get in. And I talked to my publisher, I talked to Louise, I said, I'm going to take each of the 81 verses of the Tao, and I'm going to write for a year. And I started January the 1st of this year. And I'm going to start and write an essay every 3 or 4 days. But before I do, what I want to do is create a place. And this is something I really want you to think about. I want you to create a sacred place in your home, in your bedroom, wherever it might be, in your office, in your garage. It doesn't make any difference. And you don't need to you can live in a 1-bedroom apartment and do this. And in this sacred place, I'd like you to put your energy into it. I have a place like this on Maui, and it's a place that I revere. It's just a little dining room, but in it, it has everything that has sacred value to me in it. Books that people have sent me, photographs, crystals that people have offered to me in the way of, I had 4 different drawings of Lao Tzu, and I had them framed 8 by 10, and I have them right there as I look at them, along with one of Sai Baba, my teacher, who comes and visits me in my soul and my dream and my heart, and has the gift of fish and loaves on this planet today. We'll be celebrating his 80th birthday in 2 weeks. Is this person who has this gift of fish and loaves has manifested for me a Ziploc bag, a quart bag, you know, like the kind you take on the airlines, filled with vibhuti. My answer to the airlines and not taking shampoo on a plane is right here. I want you to know. So in this sacred space where I light a candle every morning, in fact, I light 3 candles. One to Lao Tzu, one to Ralph Waldo Emerson, whose 8 by 10 photograph is in front of me, and one to Sai Baba. And they are there. And it may sound silly, but what happens as I walk by this sacred spot in my home where I do this writing with all of these things that are in it, as I walk by, I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, as you know, if you watch the PBS show, between 3 and 4 every morning. And in that quiet time, when you're closest to God, as again Rumi said, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Do not go back to sleep. You're all awakened between 3 and 4, virtually every one of you. That wake-up call is not an accident. It's a universal human experience. It's the quietest time. It's the time when there's the least distractions. God's one and only voice is silence. Silence. That place where you can be connected. And as you get up and fill your body with the supplements that you take, with the antioxidant drinks that you take, with whatever it is, the nanogreens that I drink, and all of the things that I fill myself with in the morning with this healthy, wonderful feeling of good things going through my body. Not coffee, not cigarettes, not poisons, but really life-affirming food. And as you walk by this place with the candles burning and so on, it will draw you into it. It will draw you there. You feel as if you have to enter this space, whatever it might be, your sacred space. And when you sit down in that space, in the middle of the night, and allow yourself to know that what you are here for is now going to be made manifest for you, you begin to allow it to come through you. Now, come on, everything is channeled. God writes all the books and builds all the bridges. I mean, who do you think is delivering this talk? This is just Dyer. This isn't me. This is like these words that are coming here from where? Where are they coming from? Who owns these words that come here and go into this little thing that I'm holding in my hand and titillate the stapes in your ear so that you can hear these vibrations? We don't own any of this stuff. This isn't mine. I don't get any of this. I get the royalties. But it's not, it's like you begin to realize that you can be used as an instrument, as a vessel for anything. And when you get your ego out of it, and that's what Lao Tzu teaches more than anything else, about leadership particularly, and this is that the great leaders emulate the ocean. And what is the ocean but the greatest source of power on the planet? And why is the ocean the greatest source of power on the planet? Because it stays low. All of the rivers and all of the streams are all in work at flowing toward the ocean. It all flows back. And it flows back because the ocean doesn't lord itself over anyone. It practices radical humility. It stays low. It interferes not at all. It just allows. It allows everything. Non-interfering is probably the basis of the Tao. And we need to have an awareness of this in our leaders. Eventually, leadership, political leaders, community leaders, business leaders, when we have enough of us, and I'm doing a weekend seminar on living the Tao, inviting people from all over the planet to come to Maui next October and to be there for a way of living the Tao and putting it into practice everywhere in our lives. So that, I think it's the 57th verse of the Tao says that any country which has most of its energy invested in weapons is not of the Tao. And any country that has most of its energy invested in building homes and growing food for the masses and not interfering with them is connected to the Tao, is living the Tao. From a great distance, if you were to look at this planet. Now, I've been writing from a distance for the last year. Yesterday morning was the first morning this year that I got up and I didn't have to, I wasn't required by my inner passion to study the next verse of the Tao and then walk it for a day and then think about it and meditate it on a day. What a job. An incredible job. I can't even imagine what they pay me for it. That's all I have to do is get up, read the Tao, Ask, and then meditate on it, swim on it, do yoga on it, all of the things that I do every day. And then one day, before I write it, look at these pictures of Lao Tzu, one sitting on an oxen, and ask him, you wrote it 2,500 years ago. The language is a little different than our language today. How do people apply this today in the 21st century? What would you say? And then I just put my arm on the table and allow it to flow through my heart and onto the page with my little purple pen and my white pad of paper. And writer's block is impossible when you're living your passion. When you're living your passion, you're living with God. When you're living with God, you're living love. You are not, and what does the Course in Miracles say? There's only two emotions. What are they? Love and fear. And all that is love, what? Cannot be fear. And all that is fear cannot be love. So fear and God are opposites. There's no fear, there's only love. And when you're in love and allowing, there's no blockages, there's no obstacles. All you have to do is align yourself in such a way that you allow it to happen. One of the great books that has just came out last week. I spoke up in San Francisco and I had 10 cases of these shipped up there in San Francisco. This is to me the profound teaching on the planet today. I learned so much from this. It's called The Law of Attraction. Esther and Jerry Hicks just came out. And it's all of the basics of the teachings of Abraham. So from a distance, it's a beautiful book. It's really worth reading. It's one you want to study. The teachings, I'll go a little bit into it a little bit more later on. But the idea of from a distance is that here's 2,500 years have passed. 2,500 years, but there's no time. So it's like Lao Tzu is here, and I could easily be getting the same information that was given to him to give only in the language of the 21st century. Why not? Why would there be anything to stop that when you think like that? And the Tao doesn't teach you to think big. It teaches you to think small. Thinking big is a mistake, according to the Tao. Because when you think big, you can't get big things done. We can only do things in this moment. So it teaches us to be in this moment. It says you can get anywhere from here. You can get anywhere from here. The key is you have to be here. Like, you have to totally be here. So that anything big that you want to do, like 19 years ago when I decided to give up alcohol, or when it was decided for me, because I was just being done. I did it. I know what addiction's about, and then I can teach about it. I lived in an orphanage for 10 years so that I could understand self-reliance. Then I could teach it. It's really simple.
Hi there. My name is Liz Dawn, and I am the co-creator of Celebrate Your Life events. And I hope you're loving this amazing workshop with the late and great Dr. Wayne Dyer. This was recorded live at one of our Celebrate Your Life conferences. And I'm so excited that we could share this very special workshop with all of the Evan Carmichael fans. And to learn more about us, just click the link below and visit celebrateyourlife.com.
You go through what you have to go through, even the torturous things that you have to go through, in order to be able to give. Because the most important thing that you can learn, according to Lao Tzu, is that when you are at one with what is called the hidden virtue, which is the hidden godliness, kindness, goodness, love that is in you and what you came from, when you are in harmony with that, all of your life is about giving. When you're not in harmony with the hidden virtue, all of your life is about getting. So you make the shift from getting, what's in it for me, how much am I going to make, how well am I going to do, what does my ego say, to how may I serve, what may I give, how can I do it. And if I'd have thought 19 years ago that I was going to not be able to have another beer for 19 years, it's too big. It's too big. You can't even do that. You can't not drink for 19 years. You can only not drink now. And that's easy. So you don't, even if you've got a great big project in mind, you bring yourself down to what can we do here? Now, today. And that's what you do. What you can be here now, which is what all of nature knows to do. Every raccoon knows this. Every bat knows this. So from a distance, I've been talking to this man and wondering at the beginning, who am I? Do you know how many translations there are of the Tao that I came across when I Googled it? When I didn't Google it, my daughter Googled it. I don't know how to Google anything. I don't even have a computer. I've never done an email. I don't do emails. There's about 7,000 translations that just are translated into English of the Tao Te Ching, of the 81 verses. So, and they're similar, and some say this, and some use that word and this word. And I picked a dozen of the ones that seem to be the most relevant. And I read, each time I would read 12 translations of the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. And then I would meditate on it. And then I would do yoga on it. And I would allow myself to just let it come into me. And sometimes when I would read one, I just thought, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to, and then I would let go of that. And just amazingly, and especially when I would enter that sacred space, it would just flow. It's just, I can only say it with all the passion that I feel it right now in this moment. It works if you're willing to let go. If you're willing to go back to what your life was like in the first 9 months and surrender and not worry and get out of the way and then be in a state of just gratitude. If the only prayer you say every day, if the only prayer you say is thank you, that's enough. You're on your way. It's staying in that state of gratitude and knowing and never fighting it. And whatever comes, even if it doesn't make any sense to you whatsoever, you embrace it. You embrace it because that passion that you feel is God speaking to you, saying, don't die with your music still in you. Don't get to that place. Everything looks different from a distance when you get back. Imagine stepping back and looking at this entire planet from a distance. And I kept thinking about that. And every time I would look at this picture of Lao Tzu and I would ask, and then the day before the writing would be so sweet, so perfect. And I'd call my editor and I'd read it and I'd say, I'm Lao Tzu. What's going on here? I'm going to be speaking Chinese next. It was overwhelmingly powerful to do this. And then I heard a song. It was written by Julie Gold in 1985, and it was sung by Bette Midler in 1990 at the outbreak of the Gulf War. It touched me to a point where I got that gooseflesh, which I'm getting right now when I heard that song, written by a 30-year-old girl. There's so many beautiful words in that song. I mean, does that war make any sense from a distance? I mean, when we look back at training people to go and kill other people, the Tao says the people, when you go to war, it says that the people will prevail who have no enemies, even if they have to go to war. And that all victories should be treated as a funeral. As a funeral. And an apology needs to be offered to all of those who were vanquished, saying we just didn't know a better way, but we'll figure one out. No enemies. Imagine a world in which there are no enemies. From a distance, I've been sitting there writing across the miles and across the centuries, listening to someone speak to me. When I don't even hear the voice, I just let it flow. And it flows out in perfect harmony. 540 individual pages, handwritten, which will be edited. All without one moment of doubt, without one moment of consideration for writer's block or not knowing whether it will happen. From that same perspective, for every single one of you in this room, there is an awareness that there is something grander and greater that awaits you when you get back to that first 9 months of your life, where you surrender and let go and allow it to come and flow. I want to read something to you from Carl Jung, who was a Taoist. I mean, he lived and talked and wrote a lot about the Tao. I was a Jungian therapist. I was trained in that discipline many years ago. It's called The Stages of Life. Now, there's a morning and an afternoon of your life, which is I'm going to write next. Starting January the 1st, I'm going to start on this. The morning of our life doesn't have anything to do with your age. Some people never have a morning of their life, like Jesus, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Zoroaster, the great spiritual teachers. They just show up. And they don't have to go through certain kinds of things that we are trained. But I had a morning of my life and an afternoon, and I'm in an evening. The morning of our lives, we are taught certain things from the time that we emerge from the womb. And what we are taught when we emerge from the womb is almost everything the opposite of living Tao consciousness, living the hidden virtues, living God realization. In the presence of a God-realized being, the laws of the material world do not apply. They just don't apply. Healing can take place instantaneously for anything. The right person can show up right out of nowhere in the biggest surprise that you've ever had. You can be in more than one place at the same time. You can manifest whatever it is that you need. It'll just be there. And it'll be too weird for you, but there it is. When you get in the presence, or when you yourself enter God realization, that's what I'm calling the afternoon of our life. Generally speaking, it takes place somewhere between the ages of 31 and 44, 45. Very generally speaking. But by and large, in the morning of our life, you learn from the people around you who are doing their absolute best to raise you to be good citizens, very likely. Mothers and fathers and grandparents and cultures and the church organizations and all the things. But most of it is designed to get you to fit in, to be a good person, to be a good family member, to follow the rules, to get good grades, to save for the future, to put your money away, to make sure that nobody steals your money from you, to have goals, to get through this class and that class, to get through this degree and that degree, to graduate, to get it to a certain job, to do whatever it takes on the job in order to get yourself a promotion. All of it being organized around getting more, attracting as much as you possibly can get. It's about getting. It's about getting, and it's about pleasing, and it's about fitting in, all of which are non-Tao principles. All three of those are total non-Tao principles, but that doesn't matter. It's not about the Tao when you're getting in the morning of your life. And then something happens. What I call a quantum shift takes place. And you move into something called the afternoon of your life, or the evening of your life. And here, your values, your desires, what it is that is important to you have done a complete radical shift. It's no longer that important thing for you to be a good family member. It's no longer the most important thing for you to please your parents. It's no longer the most important thing for you to save for the future, or to get good grades, or even to get a good house, the right house. You begin to feel a sense of connectedness to everything and everyone. From a distance, you look at this planet and you think, how could anything on here be fighting each other? We're all breathing the same air. We all came from the same place. How could there possibly be enemies? When you look at it from that, there's an interconnectedness. That's why I've often said that it makes about as much sense to have a smoking section in a restaurant as it does to have a peeing section in a swimming pool. You know, it's just, no. You don't pee over there. You don't pee over there. That's not a peeing section. Over here's where you pee. Sounds a little crazy to me. Now you have to step inside to get a breath of fresh air. A breath of fresh air. Yeah, I said that right. So we start in the afternoon of our life. There is a shift. And the shift is usually preceded, not always, but it can be, and I invite you to open yourself to the possibility that you can invite in a quantum shift. And I'll describe it for you in just a moment. And as you get to one of these quantum shifts in your life, things that were so important to you in the morning of your life no longer are important. And I suggest that most people who would attend a conference such as this, here, in this beautiful place, on these beautiful days, and sit and listen to speakers from all over the world come and talk to you about it, that virtually everyone in this room is moving into, or has moved into, something called the afternoon of your life, in which the general priorities of your life, what you expect out of it, what you expect to do while you're here, have shifted. And it no longer satisfies you, it no longer fulfills you to live the afternoon of your life by the rules that you learned in the morning of your life. Here's what Jung said about all of this. Thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with the false presupposition that our truths and our ideas will serve us as hitherto. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning will be little at evening. And what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. It's so dramatic and so powerful that you get to the place, whether it's in your relationships or your work or your family or your community or your country, where you know you're living a lie. And it is increasingly intolerable. for you to continue to do that. And people around you who are still stuck in the morning of their life are choosing to stay there and continue to seek after more stuff, accumulating more, getting more prestige, making more money, getting to another place, having a higher goal. People around, that becomes anathema. It becomes something that you feel like an infection in your body, just growing. And it isn't that these people or these events or this place or the things that you are doing, it isn't that they're bad, it isn't that anybody's done anything wrong. It's that you have taken on this shift. And generally, when you make this shift, I've got the summary, just a real brief summary of how this affects men and women. When a quantum change takes place, which I haven't described yet, but will. When it takes place and you move from the number one priority of your life being to get good grades, to fit in, to be a good daughter or a good mother, or to fit in with your family business or whatever it is that it might be, when that shift has completed itself, and you now realize that there's something greater, something grander, something more profound. Let me read to you one of the great ladies, one of the great writers ever. Her name's Lillian Smith. She wrote in the 40s. She died in the 70s, I believe, or 60s. There's an award, a literary award, given in her name, the Lillian Smith Award. She wrote a book that I'm asking Louise to, it's out of print, to republish. Hopefully I'll have it by next year. It's called The Journey. And in the 1940s, she went all through the South. And she looked at integration and the ways that whites were treating blacks in the South, and had a profound change. And when you read her, she had a double mastectomy also, which was not ever even talked about when she was writing in the 40s. And her writing is so profound. Well, this is what she says. She says, to pray, it is so necessary and so hard. Hard not because it requires intellect or knowledge or a big vocabulary or special techniques, but because it requires of us humility. And that comes, she said, I think, from a profound sense of one's brokenness and one's need. Not the need that comes and causes us to cry, get me out of this trouble, quick, please God, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself. It comes out of our brokenness. The need to be related to something bigger than our puny little egos, which convince us that who we are is our stuff and our accumulations and our achievements and our reputations. It's like we know that we need more than our stuff and our approval and our awards and our reputations to be connected. And that's a sense of brokenness. Broken from spirit. Broken from the return trip. Tao is the way of return. It's returning to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. And she says, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself, something more alive than oneself, something older and something not yet born that will endure through time. That was Lillian Smith writing in the introduction to The Journey. That out of this need to overcome this brokenness comes the afternoon of our life. Comes this time when we say, my connection to God, to Source, to Tao, to universal mind, to spirit, to that from which I originated, from which I can never be disconnected, which is who and what I am, my own divinity. It's never too late to teach that. And it's never too early to teach that. You can do it with your babies. This is why I've got two little children's books, two wonderful children's books. One's called Incredible You, and the other one just came out. It's called Unstoppable Me. So now we enter this thing, this change, this something takes over for us. And this thing called a quantum shift or a quantum change in our hearts takes over. And once it does, there's no going back. So now, well, let me describe first the quantum shift, the quantum change. In a book called Quantum Change, they suggest that when these things come into your life and the shift is on, that the experiences are so dramatic that they often are accompanied by voices that we hear and an energy that we experience in our life that no one else knows. Here's a friend of mine. His name's Bill W. Bill Wilson. Yeah. For those of you who don't know why they're clapping, he was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And before Bill W., when you had alcoholic psychosis, you just died. It was incurable. And he found something where he brought spirit and God and helped people to return to the source of well-being from which they originated and to live from there, which requires nothing external to ourselves in the way of substances. And he said these words about this, it's called the mystical type of quantum change. He said, "My depression deepened unbearably, and finally it seemed to me as though I were at the bottom of the pit. I still gagged badly at the notion of a power greater than myself." That's the ego at work. "But finally, just for a moment, the last vestige of my proud obstinacy was crushed. All at once, I found myself crying out, 'If there is a God, let him show himself. I am ready to do anything, anything.' And suddenly, the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught up into an ecstasy which there are no words to describe. It seemed to me, in the mind's eye, that I was on a mountain and that a wind, not of air, but of spirit, was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man." A wind of spirit. It happened for me when I left drinking 19 years ago. It was 4:07 a.m. and I awoke, and I had been thinking about this whole thing because I wasn't, and I never have been, and I am not now, an alcoholic. I drank every day. I drank 2 or 3 beers in the evening. I was never drunk. I just walked away from it when I had enough. None of the symptoms of alcohol. I've had many other labels that I've placed on myself, but that happens not to be one of them. I had a teacher in India who told me, if you want to reach the level of consciousness that you were destined to reach, and that is your vision, you have to leave alcohol behind. And I said, I have no trouble with that. I just want to have a couple of beers each day after I run. And he said, no, you will do it, and when you do it, it will be easy. And I awoke at 4:07 a.m., and I couldn't remember a day in the previous 15 years that I hadn't had at least 2 or 3 beers. And the room changed. There was almost like a spray in the room. It was, I can still smell it. It was a smell of almost like roses in the room. And I can remember everything that was on the dresser. I can remember the clothes that were hanging in the closet. I can remember the color of the sheets, exactly what I was wearing at that moment. Everything about that room I can still remember. And in the quantum change, they said there are 4 qualities or characteristics that come to you when you experience one of these shifts, and you can call upon it. 1 is that they are always a surprise. 2 is that they are extremely vivid. Very vivid, almost as if you're looking through different lenses and the colors get sharper and brighter. They are also always benevolent. That is, they are always, you feel like you're in the presence of something that is just overwhelmingly loving. Getting it now. It's like a kundalini. It's like a warm shower just running up and down your spine. It feels like pure love. It's why I always enter the room from the back. You can feel the love. You can feel that. And in one of those moments, you're in a benevolent experience. And 4th is that it's always enduring. So it's surprising, it's vivid, it's benevolent, and it endures. And it's 19 years later, and it happened yesterday. There was never even a thought of having alcohol again. And it wasn't like I stayed away from it. I worried about it. I didn't go to places. It was just out of my life. It was one of those quantum shifts. Now, you don't have to have a moment like that. It doesn't have to be where you have this magnificent kind of hearing a voice. Many people do hear voices. It can be anything at all that is so profound for you that you know that you have been visited by a force that you have always been connected to, but you're now listening to for the first time. And when it happens, for women, before one of these experiences, their number 1 through 5 priorities in their life, when asked to list the values that were most significant to them out of 60 choices, they picked 1, taking care of my family, 2, being independent, 3, having a career, 4, fitting in, and 5, being attractive. Those were the qualities and characteristics, the values that women picked. After one of these quantum experiences, the number 1 priority was their personal growth, The second was their self-esteem, feeling good about myself. Third was spirituality and staying connected to God. Fourth was a sense of happiness, my own personal happiness. And 5 was living in a spirit of generosity and giving. That was the shift that took place. That's a major shift. From taking care of my family to my own personal self-esteem and feeling good about myself. To, now for men, before and after, the number 1 through 5 qualities or characteristics, values out of the top 60 listed was, for men it was, this is before one of these quantum shifts, was wealth, the accumulation of wealth, which is what we're trained in, isn't it? Secondly was a sense of adventure. Third was feeling a sense of achievement in my life. Fourth was my own personal sense of pleasure. And 5th was to be respected by others. After one of these experiences, a visitation from Tao, a connection, a reconnection to Source, the number 1 quality and characteristic of a man, and this happened for me for sure, was spirituality. The second was personal peace. The third was family, taken care of and loving family. The fourth was living God's will, or living at God realization. And the 5th was honesty. Look at the shifts. Look at what happens, what takes place when these kinds of shifts come into our lives, when we go from the morning of our life, when our primary purpose in life is to live out this ego. And the ego is this idea that we have of who we are, that says who I am is what other people think of me, and who I am is what I accumulate, and who I am is what I achieve. And that's the whole focus of my life. And the problem with that as a perspective of a way of living is that if you are what you have, then what you begin to realize is that when you don't have, then you aren't. And if you are what you do, and you no longer can do, whatever that can do is, then you aren't. And if you are what other people think of you, and what other people think of you changes, which it always does, then who you are has no substance, no value. It's located in something outside of yourself. So it's ephemeral and it's devastating if you want to get to the end of your life and not be able to, not have to say what Ivan Ilyich, Leo Tolstoy's famous character in The Death of Ivan Ilyich, said as he was lying on his deathbed, looking up at his wife whom he despised because he felt that she was responsible for all of the things that he had to do that he was unhappy with. And he looked into her eyes as he was dying and said, what if my whole life has been wrong? Can you imagine anything? I mean, just even saying that, it just is hurts inside. What if you had to go to the end of your life and say, what if my whole life has been wrong? And I think about these quantum moments and how they can come and when they can come. And there's a lady here in the room who has become one of the closest people in the world to me, someone I adore. Her name is Immaculée Ilibagiza. And she was in Rwanda in 1994, sitting in a bathroom, waiting to be executed by machetes, being hunted by Hutus, where they killed 1 million people from her tribal ancestry, the Tutsis. And she had a moment in that bathroom in which she was asking God, how can I love these people who are trying to kill me? And she was being hunted every day from April the 7th until July the 4th or 5th of 1994. And they spared no one. And she was told in a voice, you must love them. You must be able to send them love. And she said when she finally got that, a cross was placed across the room, an invisible cross that only she could see. And she knew, she didn't hope, she didn't think anymore that it might or might not. She had an absolute knowing that no one could penetrate that cross. 400 people with machetes searched that house 9 times within 90 days. It's a 2-bedroom bungalow house by American standards. And they never found her. She was just hidden with 7 other women behind a valet, clothes valet. And they never looked there. And they looked everywhere, under the beds. They even looked in suitcases for babies because they would hack the babies to death. And she wrote a book, which I wrote the foreword to, and when I met her, I knew I was in the presence of an angel. It's called Left to Tell. If you don't take anything else home from this conference, read. It's about the power of faith and what it can do to transform one's life. And when I read her manuscript, I knew I had to be involved in the publication. There's Immaculate. Immaculate. Stand up. Say hello to these people. Immaculate Ilibagiza. I love you. She's a saint who walks among us in many ways. Other ways, I have a little problem. But I traveled with her for 1.5 years, and she's become like, I don't know, a friend and a colleague and a daughter and a loving, beautiful partner in this whole vision of transforming the world. And 60 Minutes has just spent over $1 million on, went back to Africa with her and reunited all of the women but one who died of AIDS in the bathroom and are telling her story. It'll be out. Watch for it within the next few weeks or months. It's all in the can and ready to go, and it's one of the great, great shows. You'll be seeing it on Left to Tell. This quantum shift, when it happens, when there's a knowing within you, and I started out by talking about passion, that when you have that passion, you are in balance. That's what being in balance really means. We have desires. And these desires, when they are aligned with Spirit, when these desires are so aligned with Spirit that we know that this is our passion, this is God speaking to us. This is my desire, and it's not about getting for me, it's about what I'm here to give and do, because giving is what God always does, asking nothing in return. It's about giving anonymously. The great Persian poet Hafiz said, in all the history of people, in the whole history of time, the sun has never said to the earth, you owe me. And then he said, just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. It lights up the whole world. And of course in Miracles there's this wonderful line of Jesus saying, if you want to be like me, I will help you. If you want to be like me, I will help you. Knowing that we are alike. If you want to be different than me, I will wait until you change your mind. And you will change your mind. You may have to get back to that place, and the only way getting back to it may be to die. But you will change your mind. Now, I had a letter come to me that is so illustrative of all that I have been speaking here about this idea of quantum shifts, the interconnectedness of all things, and the awareness that we can get into the afternoon of our life, live out what our highest values are, and access whatever it is that we need by having passion about the outcome never being in doubt. Just having that passion. And the question is, can you do it? The question is, can you have the knowing? I've gotten this sort of reputation for being able to heal animals. I can't do it with people, but animals, for some reason, I have a very deep connection to St. Francis. And people, when they brought animals to me with like these huge tumors, cancerous tumors and so on, or a cat with leukemia, and I presented these cats, and for some reason, and when they say, can you do this? I say, absolutely. Well, don't you have any? No, I don't have any doubt at all. It's an absolute knowing. It's sort of like when they ask Sai Baba, this divine soul in Puttaparthi in India, on his 75th birthday, are you God? They ask him in front of all the cameras, with millions of people surrounding the village of Puttaparthi. He said, yes, I am. He said, and so are you. He said, the only difference between you and me is that I know it and you doubt it. Can you get to the non-doubting place? The absolute knowing that this inner beckoning, this feeling that you have inside about wanting your life to improve, about wanting to make a difference, about wanting to be closer to God, about wanting to promote peace in the world, about whatever it is that you have a knowing about. Are you able to banish the doubt in such a way that you're willing to invite whatever it is that's going to show up and know that it's all for your best, even if it shows up as an obstacle. So here's the letter that I received. I love this letter. It was written March the 20th, 2006. I was having the roughest time of my life. 3 years of pain, darkness, loss, and self-pity, not knowing how to cope. As usual, I got up early to feed my horses, opened the glass door, and at my feet was a tiny baby bird covered in down. I looked her over, and she was fine. I searched my entire acre, rooftop and all, trying to find her nest to put her back in safe and sound, but all to no avail. No nest anywhere to be seen. Where did she come from, and what am I going to feed her? I tried feeding her small bits of fruit. Nope. Then dug up worms. Nope. Then remembered having some seed in my garage, several different colors and sizes of seeds, and she would eat only the red ones. But she was eating, and I was happy. She was growing fast and became friends with my dog as they played together in the yard. My dog slapping her in the face and slapping my dog back with her wings. She loved riding my horse and would perch up on top of my thoroughbred's ass and take a ride. As she grew, I would help her to strengthen her wings so she could fly. And she would fly just a few feet at a time, but she always wanted to be with us, me, my dog, and my horses. Every morning, around time to feed the horses, she would be at my kitchen window, knocking, "Let me in," or "Feed me," or something. Once in a while, she would come in and spend the night with us, but mostly she just wanted her meal. When she finally did learn to fly, I would take my dog for a walk, and I'd see her on my rooftop watching us walk away. "That's too far for me to fly. I'm scared," she seemed to be saying. And one morning during our walk, I could see her watching us. I called to her, "Come on, lover dover. Come on, lover dover. You can make it. Just try." I could see her attempting to take off, but she would back off and try again and again as we waited for her to half a block away. I'd call her again, "Come on, lover dover." And lo and behold, she took off, flapped her wings, and flew directly to my waiting hands. A half a block all by herself. By this time, she was at my kitchen window every single morning, knocking at my window for her breakfast. She would eat, then take off for the day, not to be seen until her evening meal. But she always came home. During this entire time, I was the saddest I had ever been in my life. I was alone, I was lonely, and I was afraid. Very little family and very few friends. My cousin from Buffalo called me one day to see how I was doing, and she asked me to come to Buffalo to visit for a week. I agreed to come because I thought it might do me some good. My mother agreed to take care of my house and my animals. "Mom," I said, as daughters say to their mothers, "be sure that Lover Dover comes home to eat. She will come to the window when she's ready, and she will knock," as hard as that is to believe. Mom laughed, but she agreed to care for Lover Dover. Nearly every day I would call Mom and ask if Lover Dover came home. And Mom would laugh and say yes. She came to the window, she knocked, and I fed her. And she'd say, "Yes, well, that's a big load off my mind." She said, "I brought a couple of books with me to Buffalo to read on the plane. Self-help books, of course." She said, "I needed help with my sadness and my loneliness and my purpose in this world. And I looked everywhere, all the while asking, am I serving any purpose on this planet? Am I worthy of my blessings? Am I supposed to spend the rest of my days alone?" On my way back on the plane, I pulled out my book. I hadn't started it yet, but I started reading with chapter 1, a book by Dyer, who I believe is a highly evolved spiritual master. Well, she says, I got kind of bored with the first chapter. So much for the highly evolved spiritual master. And I started thumbing through the pages, reading paragraphs here and there, and just as the plane was ready to land, I felt an overwhelming feeling of sadness. I'm going home. But to what? The chores? The walls? The silence? Who will be happy to see me when I get home? Nobody. Trying to hide the tears flowing down my face from my neighbor on the plane, I flipped to the very last page of that book. There the author says, "I want to end this book with one of my favorite poems entitled Guardian Angels. It deserves to be read slowly and lovingly." Well, I cannot express the warmth in my chest the moment I read the very first line of that poem. So this was written 20 years before that. It's called You'll See It When You Believe It. And this was my turning point when I wrote this book. It was the first book that I wrote that was not about psychology. It was about spirituality. Major shift in my life. Had to talk the publisher into it, said it wouldn't work and all of that. So here's how I ended this book. A sensitive Norwegian poet, Rolf Jacobson, wrote a beautiful poem entitled Guardian Angel. It deserves to be read slowly and lovingly. I am the bird that knocks at your window in the morning, and your companion whom you cannot know, the blossoms that light up for the blind. I am the glacier's crest above the forests, the dazzling one, and the brass voices from the cathedral towers. The thought that suddenly comes over you at midday and fills you with a singular happiness. I am the one you have loved long ago. I walked alongside you by day and look intently at you and put my mouth on your heart, but you don't know it. I am your third arm and your second shadow, the white one, whom you don't have the heart for and who can never, ever forget you. I am the bird that knocks at your window in the morning. Now, this book, the ending of that book, I don't have the time, but it could take me an hour to tell you the struggle I had about whether to include that poem in that book or not. I put it in, I took it out. I called my editor in New York. I said, I don't really think it's an appropriate ending to this. She said, then take it out. I said, okay, take it out. 24 hours before it was to be published, I put it back in. 12 hours before, I took it out. And the last hour before I had galley deadlines, I called up and said, put the damn thing in. I can't get it out of my mind. What's the connection between, am I doing it or was I being done? And was Rolf Jacobson in Norway writing this poem knowing about this woman out in Nevada who was desperate and lonely? Listen to the conclusion of her letter. Needless to say, I was overwhelmed by the message I had just received. Coincidence? I think not. That was one of the first times I had a genuine smile on my face in 3 years. It was the start of my healing and a blessing in disguise. Shortly thereafter, I never saw Lover Dover again. She didn't come home that morning or any morning thereafter. So, coincidences, all of that kind of thing, the interconnectedness between all of things, the awareness that when you begin to open your eyes and shift, what would motivate her to pick up that book 20 years after it was published? To carry it on a plane and to have me. And you know, that poem wasn't even a poem that I discovered. It was given to me by my very first doctoral student, Pat Murphy, at St. John's University in New York. He said, this is so beautiful. I think you should put it in your book. Back and forth. And you're doing it, and you're back, and you're forth, and you think that you've got it all handled. So the only thing I didn't mention was this wonderful, what I called my bathroom book. I didn't write it, but it's myself, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, who is here, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, Louise Hay, Ram Dass, Bernie Siegel, Scotty Peck, Joan Borysenko. I want you to put this in your bathroom because it replaces the energy that is leaving with the highest energy of the planet. There you are. The experience of God. And so we come to the end, at least the end of my presentation here. We shall not cease our exploration. And when we finish exploring, we shall return to the place from which we came and know it for the first time. But you don't have to die to go there. You can access a quantum moment. You can make the shift into the afternoon of your life and live it by those rules rather than anybody else's that were handed to you, so you no longer have to live that lie. I close with one of my all-time favorite poems from Mary Oliver, who I think is America's great contemporary poet. It's called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. Calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the great family of things. In every moment, ladies, and gentlemen, every moment of your life, you have that great choice offered to us from the Course. You can either be a host to God, the Tao, or a hostage to your ego. It's your call. The wild geese are calling you home. Thank you, and God bless you. Namaste.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
To watch another amazing Wayne Dyer video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I have a right to be happy. I have a right to be unhappy. You'll hear people say it all the time. I have a right to be miserable. And they go around defending their right to be miserable. And when you defend your right to be miserable, you attract exactly what you're defending into your life.
Please, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back on public television. It's now 10 years we've been creating public television programs. It's been a wonderful journey. I obviously support public television. It's a way to bring higher consciousness to our entire country, and I'm proud and pleased to be here. This is a program about changing your life. Not in the traditional way that we think of when we think about changing our lives. Usually that means changing your behaviors, retraining yourself, getting new habits, going out and trying them out and changing your life. This is about changing your thoughts, and then your life will change. Change your thoughts, change your life. It's the name of this program, it's the name of the book. It is something that I very strongly endorse, that we have within us the ability and the capacity through the way that we use our minds and the way that we process things and events to make our lives totally shift and change around. And I can tell you that it doesn't make any difference what age you are, whether you're a teenager watching this, or whether you're someone in your 60s, 70s, 80s, or anywhere along the way. You can make that change. And I'll tell you, it happened for me. 2 years ago, on the 10th of May, I turned 65. And the next day, on the 11th of May, I had a life-changing thing take place for me. I changed the way that I was thinking about who I am, about what kind of a man I am, about what kind of a person I intend to be for the rest of my life and where I'm going. And something began to resonate with me that I had to make a shift and make a change at the age of 65. I had a wonderful office, which was really a townhouse. It was filled with over 20,000 books. It was filled with clothing. It was filled with records of all kinds. It had pictures on the wall. I had awards that I had received over the years, and everything that I had accumulated, literally, in this physical world, had accumulated in that office. I turned the key and handed it to my manager, Maya, who's been with me for almost 30 years. And I said, I would like you to sell everything or distribute everything that's in there. Sell the townhouse, get rid of it. Take all the records, all the books. I got rid of my shoes. And I left it all behind and turned it over to her to get rid of everything. I detached myself from a lifetime of accumulations. And I moved full-time to a place over in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on one of our great islands called Maui. And in the next months, I began to get a lot of things coming to me about what my life was to unfold, things that I wasn't even expecting. And I think about this idea about what age you are.
and whether or not changes and shifts can be made, and how difficult so many people attribute this to. They say that's an impossibility. I couldn't possibly do that. I'm so attached to all of these things, or I'm too old. I've been living in the same place too long. Whatever it might be. Right here in this audience is one of the women that I revere. I think more than any other woman I can think of in the professional world. At the age of 60, she changed her thoughts, and her life changed dramatically. She started a publishing company called Hay House, which is one of the world's largest publishers of spiritual and higher consciousness materials. She wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life. She's here today. Her name is Louise Hay. Louise, would you stand up and be acknowledged? Thank you, sweetheart. Louise, with a great number of people from all over the world, just celebrated her 80th birthday. So, I should look so good even at 60, all right? And I'm just so deeply honored that you're here, dear. Thank you. What happened for me in the next few months was absolutely life-changing. I had a friend tell me who was severely addicted to all kinds of drugs and alcohol, who was basically very close to death. He refused all kinds of treatment. He wouldn't go through the programs and so on. But he read a book, and the book was called The Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching. T-A-O-T-E-C-H-I-N-G. Tao Te Ching. Tao in ancient Chinese means the way, the great way. Te is the term that means the application of or the virtue of. And Qing in ancient Chinese means book. So it's the book for applying the virtue of living the way. That's what this book means. And he told me that, and I thought, I've heard of the Tao Te Ching, I've heard of Taoism, I'm familiar with that. I had read about it when I was in college. I'd even lectured a little bit about it when I was teaching at a university in New York City, at St. John's University. It was something that I had sort of a cursory awareness of. But it wasn't something that I was really profoundly interested in. I was watching a TV show one night, and someone talked about the Tao on there. I walk into a bookstore, and there's a copy of the Tao. This is all happening in the 6 months or so that between when I had left and knowing that it was time for me to detach myself from all of the things that had been so much a part of my life and move on into a new area of my life. So I couldn't resist it any longer, and I said, I really want to read the Tao, and I'm going to take the next year, a full year. And in that year, what I would like to do is I would like to read each verse. There are 81 verses in the Tao Te Ching. You can read it in an afternoon, but you can study it for a lifetime. And in the studying of this, I said I would like to just take those 365 days for the next year, and in every 4 days, I am going to read one verse. Some of them are only 4 lines long. Some of them are 12, 16 lines long. I'm going to create for myself a way of seeing if I can live this Tao. And what I did was I would read it, then I would meditate on it, I would walk on it, I would go swim on it. When I would do yoga, I would practice it, and then I would sit down after the 4th day. And I had a picture of the man who was considered to be the author of this, although there's no historical actual record of his name is Lao Tzu. This is the visage that I looked at. This is the image of an artist's drawing of Lao Tzu. In ancient Chinese means old man. Old man. He was the old man who was living in China in the time of the warring states, and he decided he didn't want any more to do with war and violence and hatred and killing and all of the things that were so much a part of his world. And he got on his oxen and he left, and before he left to go off and be by himself, he dictated some 5,000 Chinese characters, these 81 verses that became the Tao Te Ching. There are some people who call the Tao Te Ching the wisest book ever written. If you Google this thing called the Tao Te Ching, you'll come up with over 1,300,000 hits on the Tao Te Ching. Not only that, there are 14,000 translations of the Tao Te Ching that I have come across. So what I did is I took 10 of those translations, the ones that seem to be the most relevant, the ones that seem to have the most meaning to those people who lived in this part of the Western world, and I combined them into what I consider to be the most useful translation of the Tao Te Ching. And each morning I would get up and I would look at this picture and I would ask, what is it that you would say to the people who are living now at this time, given the conditions that we have in our life right here? What is it that you would do? Many people call this a manual for achieving a way of life that literally guarantees integrity, joy, peace, and balance in our life. Now, there was a man who was a contemporary of Lao Tzu. His name was Confucius. He was many years younger than Lao Tzu, but he kept hearing about this old man who had all of this great wisdom. And one day, he decided that he was going to go, legend says, and visit Lao Tzu. And he spent a full day listening to this man, because Confucius was someone in China who was trying to lay down all the rules of etiquette and how to conduct yourself and trying to dictate to the people what they should be. Lao Tzu had nothing to do with any of that. And when he went to see Lao Tzu, he came back and he talked to all of his people. And this is what he said. He said, "Of birds, I know they have wings to fly with. Of fish, that they have fins to swim with. Of wild beasts, that they have feet to run with. For feet, there are traps. For fins, there are nets. For wings, arrows. But who knows how dragons surmount wind and cloud into heaven? This day I have seen Lao Tzu, and he is a dragon." And there he is, a dragon. And a dragon in ancient Chinese was a picture of someone or something that was so mysterious and so difficult to comprehend, because it could always be something else. There was a great teacher who came many years after that. His name was Rumi, who was Jalaluddin Rumi, who was a great poet, a Persian poet in the 14th century. And he had a line. He said, "The day that you were born, a ladder was set up to help you to escape from this world." I believe that the Tao Te Ching and this thing that I have done, this Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life effort that I spent 1 full year on every single day, doing exactly what I just said, is a ladder that will help you to return. In the Tao, there's a very famous line. The 40th verse of the Tao says, "Returning is the motion of the Tao." Returning is the motion of the Tao. So that all of us came from a divine spiritual essence, invisible. Everything in the world of form emanated from something that is formless. There was a split second when you went from non-being to being. And what Lao Tzu was trying to teach was to be able to return to that place from which you came and live your life from the spiritual perspective and become a God-realized being. Another great poet, T.S. Eliot, once said, "We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time." For the first time. What I'm asking you to do, and what Lao Tzu seemed to be saying, was learn to die while you're alive, because you will ultimately return. All of us have a return trip, a round trip ticket when we came in, didn't we? But if you could learn to die while you're alive, and there's a great story. I have to tell you this story. I want to read this story to you. It's a way to look at this idea of dying while you're alive. It goes like this. To die while we are alive gives us the only opportunity we will ever have to get outside of this package that houses us temporarily. There's an ancient parable that repeated generation after generation by the spiritual masters of India, which illustrates this point. Listen to this wonderful story. A traveler from India went to Africa to acquire some local products and animals, and while in the jungle, he saw thousands of beautiful, multicolored talking parrots. He decided to capture a talking parrot and take it back as his pet. At home, he kept his parrot in a cage, and he fed him, and he gave him wonderful seeds and honey, and played music for his pet, and generally, he treated him very well. When it was time for the man to return to Africa 2 years later, he asked his parrot if there was any message that he could deliver to the parrot's friends who were back in the jungle. Well, the parrot told his master to say that he was very happy in his cage, and that he was enjoying each day, and to convey his love. Well, when the traveler arrived back in Africa, he delivered the message to the parrots back in the jungle. Just as he finished his story, a parrot with tears welling up in his eyes fell over dead. The man was alarmed, and he decided that the parrot must have been very close to the parrot in the cage, and that this was probably the reason for the sadness and for his demise. When the traveler returned to India, he told his pet what had happened. As he finished his story, the pet parrot's eyes welled up with tears, and he kneeled over dead in his cage. The man was astounded, but he figured that his pet died from the despair of hearing of the death of his close friend back in the jungle. The trader opened up the cage and tossed the dead bird outside onto the trash heap. Immediately, the pet parrot flew up to a branch on the tree outside. The trader said to him, "So you're not dead after all. Why did you do that? You tricked me." And the parrot responded, "Because that bird back in Africa sent me a very important message." What was the message? The trader wanted to know. He told me that if you want to escape from your cage, you must die while you're alive. We must indeed die while we are alive, in order to be able to look back at our waking consciousness and see ourselves trapped in our cage, which in our case is our body. And then we will see how unnecessary it is to remain caged. Isn't that a great story? I love that story. Yeah, you can applaud. What I encourage you to do is to create for yourself a sacred space. And in this sacred space, I would like you to place everything that has energy value to you. Photographs. I have this photograph that I looked at every day for 1 year and began to talk to after a while. It's a little weird, but you begin to get this idea. And those of you who wonder why I am wearing no shoes, I'd like you to know that where I live, you never walk into a sacred space with your shoes on. It would be considered dishonorable to do so. And to me, this stage, this setting, this beautiful place, and this beautiful symbol is a sacred, sacred space. I live without shoes. I heard it said once that if you wear shoes everywhere you go, the whole earth will feel like leather. And it's nice to feel what the earth feels like and to feel that naturalness. So in that sacred space, you will feel the energy of the photographs, of any mementos that you have, of pictures of your children, of drawings, of statues, of anything at all that you can think of. I have a beautiful sacred space, and it calls me. And as it calls me, when I go into that place that is so profoundly sacred to me, the most beautiful things begin to happen for me, particularly in the middle of the night when no one else is up, and I feel closest to God, and I feel closest to this beautiful old man who sent so many important messages to me through his Tao Te Ching and in my meditations to help me to create this program, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. What I would like to do now is to look at the some of the key thoughts that I would like you to think about and consider changing as you become a person who becomes more God-realized. That is, someone who has died but stayed alive and returned and went back on that return trip. The first of these thoughts to change is to change the idea that I can't trust in my own nature to I trust in my own nature. Did it ever occur to you that you have a nature? That nature is so profound and is always calling you. You know it. No one else can know it. No one else can impose it on you. No one else can tell you what it is that you feel in here, that you know is why you're here and what you're doing here. There's no one else can explain that or explore that with you. You can't share it. Everything in the universe has a nature. Your dog has a nature. A crocodile has a nature. A duck has a nature. A crow has a nature. Everything has its nature. Everything has a dharma, including you. But what we've learned and we've grown up to believe is that I can't trust in that nature. My nature, to trust in your nature, to know that you came from a divine place of well-being and to trust in it. Listen to this, verse 38 of the Tao, a few lines. The great master follows his own nature and not the trappings of life. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness and is therefore good. Think about yourself. The first moment of life, the very first moment, that speck when you went from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, from nowhere to now here. Same thing, just a little question of spacing, just a little different spacing, all right? So you went from nowhere, now you're in now here, and where do you think you're going? Nowhere. Right? Back to nowhere. Who out there watching, who in this audience isn't going back to nowhere? That's where we're all headed, back to nowhere. So in that split second, then you lived inside your mother's womb for 9 months. And in that 9-month period of time, you trusted your nature. You didn't have a sonogram and say, oh my God, I don't have a nose. This is very scary. What if it doesn't show up on time? Or you didn't do any of that. You trusted completely in your own nature, right? And so did your mother. There's very little that you can do because what you were to become, everything that this physical body needed was all handled in there. And also, beyond what was needed for your physical world and what Lao Tzu called the world of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things. There's 10 zillion things, obviously, in the physical world, but that's how he named it, the world of the 10,000 things. And in that world of the 10,000 things, everything returns back to its source. But while you're in that place, and why wouldn't you believe, even maybe for a second, that not only was my physiology all handled for me, but everything else that I needed, if I could just stop interfering with it and stop other people from doing it, that everything I needed. And that's a big part of understanding change your thoughts, change your life. It's a big part of that. The idea that I have a nature that I can trust, not something that I have to be afraid of, and I can stop letting other people interfere with it as well. So what happens? We go through those 9 months, totally uninterrupted. We have no questions. Everything works out. And then what? We say the very first thing, we pop out after 9 months, we'll take over from here. That was good work. Nice work, God. Thank you very much. And so what we'll do is just sort of edge you out of here, you know. So we edge God out. We take on an ego, E-G-O. And we edge out and we say, we'll take over. And we have an ego, and this ego, what this ego does is it takes on a set of beliefs. And these beliefs are that I am what I have, that I am what I do, that I am what other people think of me. So we're raised to believe that the more stuff I accumulate, the more things that I get, this is who I am. The more that people like me, this is what I'll get, and on it goes. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of one of my children. Her name is Tracy. We lived in Detroit. when she was born. She came in as a little rebellious. She came in the middle of the Detroit riots when they said nobody is allowed to go out. Anybody that goes out is going to be arrested. And she said, this would be a good time for me to show up. Which is exactly what she did. So when she showed up, after about the second or third year, Tracy went to preschool. And she came home from preschool. She was about 3. And in that time she came home and she said, she handed me a paper, and it had a gold star at the top of the paper. And I looked at it and I said, and she said, Daddy, I got a gold star, I got a gold star. I said, I'm not really interested in gold stars. I said, but what are you doing? What is this? What? She said, well, we did something in school called adding, and I got them all right, and I know how to. I said, adding? I can't believe, you're 3. You can't learn to add when you're 3. And I went through this whole long thing about adding and how terrific it was. And she kept saying, Daddy, the gold star, excuse me, but I was the only one in the class that got a gold star. I got them all right. I said, you know, Tracy, I said, honey, I said, some people just need to have gold stars. And teachers sort of like to give it out and make that the reason why you're doing something. I said, and set you apart from everybody else. I said, but your dad doesn't really care much about that and how you stack up with others, and they're going to be, I'm more interested in what you're learning. And she said, okay, she was used to that. She had a weird daddy, and she knew that. So about another month or so, she came home with a paper that had looked like it had a gold star on it, but it had obviously been taken off. Her little thumbprints were all over, but there was a place where there had been a gold star. It was taken off. And I said, what's this? Oh, she said, we're now doing subtraction. And I said, subtraction? That's amazing. And I took over by her dresser. I said, you know that money you got in your piggy bank? I put it in my pocket. I said, that's called subtraction. Isn't that great? And she said, give me that money back. And we talked about subtraction. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, honey, what happened? What was this? What was here at the paper? And she said, that. She said, the teacher gave me one of those gold stars. I said, really? I said, well, what happened to it? Oh, she said, I took it off. I said, well, what'd you do with it? She said, I gave it back to her. I said, well, what did you tell her? She said, oh, I told her to give it to someone who needs that sort of thing. True story. Yeah. And there she is. She's standing right here. She's going to be 40 this year, my daughter Tracy. So, what we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it. And one of the ways that you do to retrain it is, first, you take this idea that the ego has of fear. What are you afraid of? Anybody out there, what are you afraid of? Shift from fear to curiosity. Become curious about what you're afraid of. That's what Lao Tzu taught me. Become curious about what you're afraid of. You're afraid of flying? Get curious about that. Get interested in that. You're afraid of snakes, you're afraid of disapproval, you're afraid. Just shift from fear and say, I'm going to become more curious about what I'm afraid of. And then take all of the things that you're attached to, like all of your photographs, like all of your furniture, like all of your clothing, like all of the stuff that you find so much attachment to, and start letting it go. Mm-hmm. Start letting it go. You know, the day that I turned that key on May the 11th in 2006, I didn't even know where it was going. I just knew there was a shift taking place. I felt freer than I'd ever felt, I think, in my life. In my mid-60s, out there on a whole new adventure. And here we are talking about it on national television, on PBS. Take that idea that you have to be attached to things and know that you came in with nothing, with no thing. And you're going to leave with nothing, with no thing. And understand that your life is a parenthesis in eternity. Live there without attachments. And then take your need to be in control of yourself, of others, of the situation, and shift from control to trust. Begin to have a trust. Lao Tzu is profound about this. And each one of the 81 verses, it comes up about 60 times as you look at letting go and letting God. Allowing yourself to trust in your nature. Allowing yourself to no longer believe that everything has to be controlled by me. And that other people no longer have to be in control of me as well. Begin to trust. Just like you did for the first 9 months. You trusted. Your nose showed up. Your height showed up. Your eyes showed up. Whatever. It all showed up. It's all perfect. It's all divine. So why not wander through your life and have this wonderful, peaceful knowing that it's all fine? And finally, shift from your sense of entitlement. Nobody can treat me that way. I'm entitled to have this. Well, I paid for that. I let go. I mean, that in 1 year, I let go of all of my entitlements. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I'm just here. Shift from entitlements to radical humility. Lao Tzu speaks about it so often. Stay humble. Stay low. The greatest leaders are the ones who do the least. The ones who stay back and just model and allow. And at the end of the day, in one of the verses of the Tao, it says, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves. In verse 49 of the Tao Te Ching, here's an exact quote. The sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind because the nature of his being is kindness. And also, be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. You know what I do? Just before I did this program, I have to admit I was nervous. I was humbled by it. Like who are you, Wayne Dyer? Who are you to read the Tao and believe that you can interpret it on television and interpret it in a book and spend a year and say, I got real humble with that. And you know what I say? Tao, which is just another word for God, or Source, or Krishna, or Allah, or whatever you want to call it, guide me. Guide me now. I have that awareness before I come out. If you knew, it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. I remember Mother Teresa saying to a dear friend of mine who was asking, what could he do? What could he do to do something for her? He was, his name was Pat McMahon. He was on KTR radio in Phoenix. And finally Mother Teresa said to him, you can do something for me. She said, tomorrow morning, get up at 4 a.m. and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there who believes that he's alone and convince him that he's not. That's what you can do. That's how saints talk. That's how Lao Tzu spoke. Okay, let's go on to the next thought. To change. So you're changing from not trusting in your nature to trusting in your nature. You change your thought from I need more to what I call living contentment. What is this thing about more? It's the mantra of the ego, isn't it? I have to have more. I have to collect more stuff. I have to have more friends. I have to have more money. It's more, 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 more. When where you came from nowhere. You don't need anything. It's a continuous bombardment that we are all exposed to in this whole world of believing that we have to have more. It's one of the reasons why I love public television so much. You don't see ads on PBS. You don't have to be constantly exposed to the idea that you have to have more and you have to get more, and if you don't have this, then you're not complete, and so on. So we get bombarded with this idea of attracting more. And Lao Tzu says, live contentment. Live in a state of being contented. Here's verse 81, the last verse of the Tao Te Ching. My favorite translation of it, and I put it right into the book. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give. Mm-hmm. It's a great lesson. My son Sands, who's You know, we're very, very close. We just spent a couple of months together over in Maui, just being together, just being. It was a divine time. And he came home with, it was last summer, he came home with 4 T-shirts that he loved. And I said, well, honey, I said, which one do you like the best? He said, well, that one over there, that blue one, it's got the writing and it's got the drawing and it's got a surfer and it's got, I said, that's great. I said, I'd like to have that one. He said, no, Dad, that's my favorite. That's the one I like the best. I said, I know. I said, that's the one. Would you mind if I had that one? He said, I would mind a lot if you had that one. He said, maybe you can have one. I'm not so crazy about this one over here. I said, so you're going to give me something you don't like? You know, I said, that's the one. I love that because we have the same taste. Could I have that one? He said, Dad, you're crazy. He said, you can't have my favorite T-shirt. I said, well, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about detaching and letting go and not needing to have more. And he's heard me talk about this stuff his entire life. So finally, he just, you know, I went in and I tried it on and I said, this thing looks so great. Looking in the mirror, you know, thinking, he said, Dad, that really is mine. I said, yeah. I said, but you're going to give it to me. He said, no. I said, yeah, well, just think about it, you know, because I'm your dad, and I'd really like to have this. And so he reluctantly parted with it. And so that evening, I was still wearing the shirt, and he looked at me and he said, oh, that's my shirt. I said, you know, Sands, I said, you gave me the shirt. I said, I'm going to wear this shirt until you are happy that I have your favorite shirt. I'm never going to take it off until you are happy. He said, well, you'll be wearing that shirt a long time. I said, well, that's okay. So I wore it. The next day I got up. I slept in it that night. I got up I did. I got up the next morning. I put it on, and that Sands would come in and he'd look at me. I said, oh, you're still not happy that you gave me something that you really love, because this is what it really means to be a sage. This is what it means to be a divine being. To be someone who's willing to depart with not the things they don't like, but what they do like. I wore it the next day. I wore it the next day. I wore it for 2 weeks. Take it off only to wash it, put it right back on. 2 solid weeks. Each one of my children will tell you. Finally, one day he said, Dad, I'm so happy. I am so thrilled that you have that T-shirt. I said, oh, that's great. I can finally take this thing off. I'm going to just give it away. But it's like, what a great lesson in that. The idea that you take, you know, there's a rule. It's called the 80-20 rule. And in the 80-20 rule, it says everything that you have, all of your stuff, 20% of it is what you use. All of your clothes in your closet, 20%. You just keep using the same 20% over and over. 80% of the clothing that you have in your closet for so many people is something that you never use. You don't wear. You look at it, you store it, you think, well, there might come a day, I can't part with that, even though you've been carting it around. Every time you move it and you put it. Take the 80% that you don't use, says Lao Tzu, and give it away. Give it away. Lao Tzu said that when your cup is full, stop pouring. When your cup is full, stop pouring. We have an obesity crisis in the United States, in the Western world. The obesity crisis can be handled if you just read the Tao. If you realize, in verse 33, it says, if you realize you have enough, you are truly rich. If you could just learn something called portion control, where you just take a bite and you say, is my cup full? Stop pouring. Stop pouring. In other words, instead of filling yourself with that which is already a surplus, in the Tao it teaches us to take surpluses and to reduce them, and to take deficiencies and increase them, so that we create balance in our lives, to be in balance. You can take the jewelry that you don't use. You can take the clothing and then once you've given away the 80% that you don't use, take one of the things that you really like and practice giving that away. It's such a wonderful way. Listen to this poem. It was written by a great Persian poet named Hafiz. It says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. it lights up the whole sky. There's no owing. There's no owing. You don't have to be, you can practice living in a state of contentment. This was so powerful for me. You just can't imagine how good it felt for one entire year to walk through every day and say, I'm content. I'm content. I start out every morning of my life. The first words, Hafiz says, if there's only one prayer that you say every day, make it thank you. Just say thank you. That's how I start. Wake up, thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Source. Thank you, Tao. Whatever you want to call. The opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. As soon as you put a name on it, it dissolves. There's no name for it. It's just endlessly, invisibly, constantly in a state of creating out of a state of love. The next thought that the Tao teaches us to change. Change your thoughts. Change your life. You really do. See, so much of the previous PBS specials that I've done on inspiration and intention, these were teaching people generically how to think differently. What Lao Tzu taught me was what to specifically think in place of thinking that. Instead of thinking that I don't trust my nature, he said, trust your nature. Instead of saying, I need more, he said, you need less. More is less. That comes right out of the Tao. Next thought. Move from thinking in a rigid way to thinking and being flexible, soft, and allowing. From rigidity to softness. What a wonderful transformation that is. I was standing looking at, with my son Sands, and we were on Maui, and we were looking at water. As water was going against some rocks and some cliffs and so on. And in these pictures, in this moment, I said to my son, I said, which do you think is stronger? The water or the cliff? The water or the rocks? Which one do you think is more powerful and stronger? And he said, well, he said the rocks, obviously they're stronger and they're bigger and all. I said, water is very, very patient, isn't it? How much chance do those rocks have if they want to survive? I mean, what chance do they have? That would, and Lao Tzu is speaking to us about understanding our nature by examining how nature works and then making it apply to our thoughts. So that a soft thought, a thought that isn't a rigid thought, a thought that doesn't say you have to be this way or you have to be that way, a thought that is not stiff, a thought that water, there are so many references to water and what we can learn from water. You're 75% water. The planet is 75% water. We are water. The rest of us is just muscled water. It's all water. And water is soft. Water can enter anywhere. You get into a conflict with somebody else and you picture yourself as water. You can enter with water in any place that there's an opening. If you can visualize yourself as a being who moves into the space of water, if you can see yourself that way, you can just enter into those places in the people that you love, in your children, in your spouse, in anyone at all, and enter there softly. Here's verse 8. The supreme good is water, which nourishes all things without trying to. And verse 78, right smack out of the Tao. Nothing in the world is softer and weaker than water. But for attacking the hard, the unyielding, nothing can surpass it. There is nothing like it. Here it is. I asked when they designed this set, this beautiful set, and thank you designers for this. I asked if I could have water on the stage. They did it. They figured it out. There's Now, I'm going to try to get some of this water, okay? So you get down here and you just, I'm going to just scoop this up. And okay, now tighter you hold it, the less chance you have of doing anything with it, isn't it? How can I experience water? The way to experience water is to just get soft. Just get unbending. And there it is. That's what water is. The minute I grasp it, the minute I try. And Lao Tzu is saying the same thing is true in everything in your life. The more you grasp, the more you try to hold on to it, the more you try to be rigid with it, the less control you have of it. The softer you are, the less rigid you are, the more flexible you are as a person, the more you can accomplish. And this is a great way to practice in parenting as well. And this idea that a rigid thought, how many times have you heard this idea that if I tell you something, I'm going to stay consistent with it. We have a set of rules, these are the rules, and we'll do it this way. In the Tao it says the more rules you make, the more rule breakers you create. It's true. The more rules you have in your house about how everything has to go. We had in our house, my wife would have a big jar of M&Ms. Peanuts, all these different multicolored ones, and the kids in our house, because we didn't feed them sugar and we didn't give them sodas and stuff like that, so they were just more like a decoration. Every once in a while, someone would take them. They'd hardly ever be replaced. Now, when we had kids come over to our house who weren't ever allowed to have such horrible things, you should have seen their behavior. They would scoop them up, they'd be putting them in their pockets, and they'd get their purses, and they'd open it up, and, the whole thing would be empty. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, you mean you could just have these whenever you want them? I said, well, we don't really have any rules about that. It's just, it's not something that we encourage or discourage. It's just there. It's like Emerson had a wonderful line. He said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. A foolish consistency, a rigid consistency. So that there are many people who will say, if I say it on Monday, you can be absolutely certain that on Wednesday, I'm going to believe the same thing, regardless of what might happen on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday might have something real that you might want to be changing your mind. You might want to say, I thought that this time, but now I've seen this, and now we can shift. And you can see how this can become and so much about the Tao is on leadership. Leadership in the family, leadership in the community, leadership geopolitically. Less rigidity, more openness, more willingness to listen and say, I changed my mind. Because a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And what I believed on Wednesday has changed because of what happened on Tuesday. Now, another important thing to say to your children, to your friends, to your lover, to your spouses, to whomever, to the people you work with, words that we're so terrified to say, but which give us a sense of living with the Tao. I don't know. I don't know. I'll look it up. Say it. I don't know. Doesn't hurt. Say it again. I don't know. Isn't it fearful? I mean, so many people, and it's like very freeing, because my kids ask me something, and I say, I don't know. They say, Dad, you know everything. You know everything. I say, well, I don't know that, and I'll look it up, or we'll try to find an answer to that, but I don't quite know. I know that I spent 20 years running, and I ran every day for 20 years. For 22 years, without missing a day. 8 miles. Never missed a day. That's rigid. All right? Some call that obsessive. But you brush your teeth every day, I used to say, and you don't call that obsessive. And you go to the bathroom every day, and you don't say, well, he's obsessively doing that again today. You don't do that. But anyway, what I learned is that even in the world of exercise, there are certain things that are built in to make us rigid, to make us stiff, to make us hard. And we lift, and we run, and we kick, and this is what we call working out. There's another kind of working out that is ancient. It goes back to the time of Lao Tzu and before, which is called yoga. And yoga means union. It means union with your source. And when you do yoga, you can stay in the same place. You can do the equivalent of 8 miles. When I used to run 8 miles, I had to run 4 miles that way, turn around, 4 miles back. And I'd be sweating. Now I can do yoga, and I can just stand in one place. And in 90 minutes, by being supple, by making myself stretch, by not being hard and rigid, I can get that out there, I can get that leg up, I can do these kinds of things, and 90 minutes later, it's like I'm totally sweating and I feel so different. I used to, when I would go out at night to eat or something, after running so many miles, running marathons and doing those things, I'd go to get up and it would be, okay, it's going to take a little while, because everything was so, that doesn't happen anymore, because I've given up hard. I've given up being rigid and substituted it for being supple, for being flexible, for living a life in which I don't have to always be so fierce. Listen to this verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my all-time favorites, verse number 76. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he becomes hard and stiff. All things, including the grass and the trees, are soft and pliable in life, dry and brittle in death. Stiffness is thus a companion in death. Flexibility is a companion in life. And it's not just for how you exercise, it's how you think. How you think. In front of my place on Maui, there is a beautiful set of 11 or 12 palm trees. And these are like 30, 40, 50 feet tall. They've been there for, I don't know how long, decades. And when the winds come and when the storms come, the storms will blow them over. There they are, watch. And they're just these amazing elastic things. I learned so much from these things. I go out there, when I wrote the essay in the book on the verse 73, I just went out there with the palm trees and I would just commune with these palm trees, and they go all the way up and then they come all the way back. That's a symbol for how we need to think in our own lives. In verse 73 it says, "It is heaven's way to conquer without striving. It does not ask, yet it is supplied with all that it needs. It does not hurry, yet it completes everything on time." One of my favorite lines from the Tao, one of my favorite beliefs from the Tao is this, that you're doing nothing. All of you, you're doing nothing. You're just being done. Just like you were the first 9 months of your life. You think you're out there and you're making this happen and you're making that happen and you've got all these rigid things and you have to apply your life this way. You're not doing anything. Any more than you were having your fingernails show up when they were supposed to. And look at you. Look at all of you. Look around. It's like, what held it in yesterday? I don't know. I'm not doing anything. They fall out and they don't fall out no matter how hard I try to keep them in there. Finally, my kid said, "Give it up. Give it up." So I was over in England and they told me that I couldn't take my shampoo bottles on the plane. And there's nothing you can do about it. I said, "Yes, there is. I'll just shave my head." I no longer need shampoo. Okay, so we want to move from stiffness to flexibility. The next thought that I'd like to see us change, that the Tao taught me so much, was living by interfering, to shift that to living by not interfering. Do you know that every one of your children have the anchor of the universe located within them? And that Khalil Gibran, this is a paraphrase, he said, "Your children are not your children. They are the products of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. They're not there for you. So what are you doing interfering in their lives?" Now, I'm not talking about letting them play out in the traffic or play at the edge of a swimming pool if they don't know how to swim. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, I called this when I was working on this and living this and practicing this for that full year of 2006, the bite your tongue, zip your lip verses of the Tao. Verse 29 of the Tao. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Allow other people's lives to unfold naturally as well. We have parents, I see them a lot. They're called helicopter parents. Because they're always hovering. They're hovering over their kids and they're telling them what to do and what not to do. And my son came over from England, my son Shane, and he was going to get ready to go to college, in America. And my wife said to me, so you're going to take him and show him about registration, right? I said, oh yeah, I'll be doing that. She said, well, make sure that you help him because he doesn't have any idea how to register at the school, this great big school with thousands of people. I said, yeah, and I do, right? I would know how to register kids at school, you know. And so Shane got in the car and I said, it's all going to be fine. You'll all be fine. And we drive over to the campus and I drop him off and I have my tennis racket in the back. And he said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm a prophet. I said, I get paid by the thought. And I have a tennis match, and then I have to walk on the beach so that I get paid by the thought. He said, but what about the registration? I said, well, the registration, I said, you'll do a lot like I did when I learned to register. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you'll just go up to the people and say, where is registration? And they'll say, it's over there where all of those people are all lined up. Because I remember those days in a college of 40,000 students or so, finding out how to register. Tracy, did I take you to register, honey? No. So he said, you mean you're just going? I said, yeah, you just go with it. I said, you want daddy to walk with you over and take you through graduate? You're 18 years old and you want daddy to register you? He said, oh, no, I wouldn't want that. So we got home at the end of the evening, when I got back home, and my wife had said to me, she said, did you help Shane at registration? Oh, I said, I gave him so much help. Probably the most help he ever had in his life. I taught him how to do things for himself. And so that I wouldn't have to be interfering and hovering over and figuring it all out for them. My children know that when their science project comes up, that I'm there for consultation. But I passed science. I got through that myself. And you'll be doing your own science project. If I can help you, I'll be happy to help you. But I'm not going to be getting the glue and figuring out how to make a time clock and all of that. I said, you know, just look at a clock. That's how you tell time for me, whatever it might be. And it's not an uncaring and it's not a callous attitude at all. It's an awareness that your children have the anchor of the universe located within them. That's what Lao Tzu said. Now, my dear friend, who I love so much, she's right here in the audience, Carrie, right there, Carrie Evans from Maui. She has two beautiful little daughters. And she asked me if I would watch them one afternoon when my grandson, Carter, was visiting. I said, I'd be happy to watch them. She said, but you don't understand. I mean, they're gonna do this and they're gonna do that. I said, you just go off, and she was studying for an exam. I said, you go study, do whatever you have to do. I can handle 3 little kids out at the swimming pool for 3 or 4 hours. I can handle that. So she went off, very nervous, gave me lists, told me what to do, what they might say, what they might not say. And then if she says, now if Kylie says this, you tell Kylie, and if Kamiley says it was Kylie, Kamiley, and Carter. All right? So they go out there, and right here, there's a little pool over here, a little swimming pool. And I watch them over in the swimming pool, and Kylie takes the water and splashes my grandson, Carter, and splashes Kamiley, and Kamiley comes over to me and runs over within 2 minutes. Says, Kylie splashed me. Well, of course, I'm working on the Tao. Non-interference. And I said, splashing, honey, is in the way of things. When you're near water, splashing will take place. She said, yeah, but she splashed me. I said, you'll probably work this out. This will all be fine. And she stood there for the longest time with her little lip and so on, and finally she realized she wasn't getting anywhere with me. She went back. Before you know it, one of them had taken, now Kylie and Kamiley are teaming up against Carter. And they pushed him under or whatever. Now one of them is 5, and one of them is 4, and one of them is 7 or 8. And Carter comes running over as fast as he can, runs over. He calls me Bampa. I'm Grandpa. Bampa. Bampa, Bampa, Miley pushed me under the water. I said, Carter, I'm a Taoist master. But Bampa, she pushed me. She put me under the water. I said, you'll just have to work this one out, Carter. I'm a Taoist master. This went on all for the first hour or so. But I noticed as I was less interfering that they were working it out. They tried again after a few times. They'd come over and they wanted this and they wanted one push and wanted that. But each time when I let them know that I was watching and making sure they were safe, but I wasn't going to interfere. I wasn't going to resolve it. I wasn't going to settle their disputes for them. I wasn't going to be a helicopter parent, even for an afternoon. And the way that it resolved itself was they have the anchor of the universe within them. They have a nature. They know what to do. One of my favorite things always to say to my children when there's a conflict is, you know what the right thing to do is. What do you think? You know. You have it in your heart. You are a divine being. They all know that. I've said those words to them over and over again. You'll figure it out. You'll work it out. Not I'm going to interfere. I'm going to tell them what to do. You can practice this so many places, so many ways in your life, particularly as parents, even in business. It's very important in businesses to allow the people to say at the end of the day, right out of the Tao, oh, we did that ourselves. We did it ourselves. Mm-hmm. In the Tao it says, there's a time for everything, and everything in its time. There's a time for everything. Listen to this. There's a time for being ahead, and a time for being at peace. There's a time for being in motion, and a time for being at rest. There's a time for being vigorous, and a time for being exhausted. And in the Bible, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the sun. I practice, this was so helpful to me, particularly as I do my yoga practice. And in my yoga practice, it's there are some very exhausting postures. I do this Bikram hot yoga, all right? So it's 105 or between 105 and 110 for 90 minutes. And there's one that I used to hate. It's called triangle, you know? And so you put your foot out here and then you do this and then you get yourself up and you go all the way down and you get yourself in balance like here. So you balance down and you take your arms out here and then you take these like this and it's 105 degrees in there. You take one and you're looking up here at your arm and you look and you look and you look and then you bring it back and it lasts a full minute. And I used to just wait for that minute to be over. Oh my God, when are they going to bring me out of this posture? It was so exhausting. I started practicing what the Tao teaches, and I remembered there's a time for being exhausted. There's a time for that. And as I practiced that, I said, and there's a time for being at rest. And it's coming, hopefully soon. But in your life, there's an awareness that there is a time for all the things that go on that you think shouldn't be happening. In the Tao it says that hidden in all misfortune is good fortune. Hidden in the misfortune that you have is good fortune, because no storm can last forever. Even nature cannot create a storm that lasts forever. Ultimately, hidden within every storm is calmness. Hidden within every flood is drought and dryness. Hidden within all of the storms of your life is the peace that you desire. And it leans on you if you stop telling yourself and just let yourself go with it, to be at harmony with it, rather than trying. You can see why this is called the wisest book ever written, and we're just touching on it here, just touching on this. Lao Tzu was green before Al Gore. He was. This is verse 39 of the Tao Te Ching. When man interferes with the Tao, the sky becomes filthy, the earth becomes depleted, the equilibrium crumbles, creatures become extinct, therefore nobility is rooted in humility. Finally, I'd like to say to you, in understanding this idea of the Tao, is to take time yourself for being in nature. Take an hour a day. every day of your life, take an hour a day, no matter how busy you are, no matter what scheduling that you have, to get out in nature. Walk barefoot on the grass. Walk barefoot. It's one of the great ways to overcome an inability to sleep at night. Just go out when you can't sleep and just walk on the grass, walk on the earth, and reconnect yourself. Now, go out and be with the tree and look at what you can learn from nature. Look at these trees. Look at these animals. You can study. Look at that. You can study a flower like that is so magnificent as it's unfolding. That's an actual photograph of this thing growing and unfolding there. Be with that. You have much to learn from nature, from water, from the sky, from the winds, from the trees, from the birds. The more you do it, the more you see yourself in all of them, the more you'll feel yourself as a connected being, living the Tao. Another thought to change. To change from thinking big to thinking small. It's so much of the Tao has in it statements that seem so paradoxical and so confusing to us. More is less. Less is more. Think small and get great things done. Accomplish great things. Listen to verse 64 of the Tao Te Ching. A tree that fills a man's embrace grows from a seedling. A tower 9 stories high starts with 1 brick. And here's the most famous line out of the Tao. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with what?
The first step.
1 first step. Okay? So, today I can stand up here on this stage in this beautiful sacred place, in this beautiful yin-yang symbol, on this incredibly beautiful set that feels so much like nature. And I can say to you that in a very short time, this year, I will have completed 20 years without taking a drink of alcohol. 20 years, okay? Thank you. Now that's big. That's big. Because I drank every day. Not to get drunk, but I drank every day. 2 or 3 beers every evening after running, and it was like, and I couldn't remember a day when I hadn't had, I thought back 10 years, 12, I couldn't think of a day, not one day in the previous decade or two that I had not had a beer, or several beers. So that's big. And if I would have tried, if I'd have said to myself 20 years ago, Wayne, you're going to quit drinking for the next 20 years, I would have gone immediately and had a drink. Because it's just too big, isn't it? It's just too big. You don't do big things. You do small things and thus accomplish great things. It's a very important distinction to make. Whatever it is that you would like to create or contribute or become in your life, take 1 step. How did I let drinking go for 20 years? And I don't even know about tomorrow. I never think about tomorrow and whether I'm going to have a drink. All I know for sure is that this won't be the day. I do it 1 day at a time. That's how you overcome anything called an addiction in your life. You take it, you reconnect yourself to the source from which you came, which is a source of what? Well-being, isn't it? And you get back and return, get on the return trip and saying, I am connected to well-being. And I'll do this 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second if I have to, at a time. And when you do it, I mean, it's behind in all of the programs for overcoming addictions, and all of the work of Bill W., all of the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, all of the work of any kind of addictions. It isn't just alcohol. It can be food. It can be addiction to your emails. It can be addiction to work. It can be addiction to so many things that so many people find that they can't get past. And to move themselves into a place where I think small. I ran 7 marathons in my running years. And about the 22nd or 23rd mile, you begin to ask yourself about your sanity. And what am I doing here? And my body is breaking down. But the way that you finish the marathon is not by saying, I'm going to run 26 miles. You don't do that, especially when you still got 5 or 6 to go. You just say to yourself, can I put my foot in front of the next one? Can I take one step at a time? Can I do it one step at a time? And before you know it, you've accomplished great things. I watched my wife give birth to 4 children right there in her in the delivery room with her. And she does not, you know, when you have a baby, it takes 9 months, doesn't it? You don't say to yourself, oh my God, I gotta have a baby, I gotta get pregnant, I gotta deliver it, I gotta go through labor, because that'll just drive you. And there are people who do that. And it's a torture for them. But I watched her do it one moment at a time in labor. Not what's going to happen an hour from now, what's going to happen this afternoon, am I going to have the... none of that. And she did it all naturally, because it was all... And her mind was so strong as she was doing it that I couldn't even penetrate. I couldn't even communicate with her. She was so focused on just being here. She would say, these are not labor pains. These are just signals. Just signals. And I can take this signal. I can do this for 1 minute. I can do this. It's the way everything gets done. I watch the great tennis players on the planet. Roger Federer, Pete Sampras, these people that are really masters at this game that I played for so many years, not even close to those kinds of levels. And they'll be in a tournament, they'll have a seeding, and they'll say, here's the first round, here's the second round, here's the third round. There's no such thing as playing the 4th round before you've played the first round. And then when you get to the first round, you don't go out there and say, well, I've got to beat this person in 3 sets. You say, I'm going to think 1 serve at a time. I'm going to think 1 point at a time. And every great athlete, I don't care who they are, they will always say, I can't think out there in big ways. I can only think small. Thinking small is what gets great things done. Verse 63, achieve greatness in little things. Take on difficulties while they are still easy. Do great things while they are still small. The sage, one of my daughter's names, the sage, does not attempt anything very big and thus achieves greatness. Greatness comes from being in the moment, here, present, in the now. The sage confronts difficulties but never experiences them. This is the idea of thinking small. And finally, I'd like to see you change from this thought. Change from seeing yourself as separate to seeing yourself as connected to everyone and everything in the universe. Our ego tells us that we are separate, that who we are is this body that we have, and everybody out there is separate from me. Nothing has been more profound and more powerful and important for me than this verse of the Tao Te Ching. This idea that we are all one. That all of us emanated from the same source. And by doing so, by emanating from the same source, we need to see ourselves as connected to every single being, every single person, every single flower, every single tree, every single animal. If you can see yourself in everyone, we're all connected. It makes about as much sense to me to have a smoking section in a restaurant as it does to have a peeing section in a swimming pool, right? Oh, no, kids, no, don't pee over here. We pee over here. Does that make any sense? The Native Americans, one of my favorite quotes, I've used it many, many times. The Native Americans would say, no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. No tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. We are all branches on a tree called humanity. When you read the Tao, when you read this idea about changing these thoughts and changing your life, you're going to see endless verses that speak to the absurdity of the idea of you having an enemy. The idea that you and anyone else on this planet is an enemy. In the Tao it says, I and enemy cannot exist in the same sentence. And he said, even those who go to war, the ones who will triumph in war are those who go to war without an enemy. And they will treat every victory in war not as something to celebrate, but as a funeral, as an indication that we haven't reached the highest place within ourselves to see that even those people that we judge to be our enemy are really connected to us. And it says in the Tao that a bad man is a good man's job, and a good man is a bad man's teacher. A good man is a bad man's teacher. So finding that and seeing that, listen to verse 10. Carrying body and soul and embracing the one, can you avoid separation? One who heeds this power brings the Tao to this very earth. This is the primal virtue. This was so helpful to me as I thought about it. Remember, I spent 4.5 days on each one of these verses. And in each one of those 4.5 days, I wasn't writing. I wrote the last 4 or 5 hours of those 4.5 days. For 4.5 days, I took that verse and I went out into the world and I looked at everyone that I encountered, everyone that I saw, and I tried to see myself in them. The person that was, dressed differently than I would dress, the person who was not as attractive, the person who was very old, the person who was very young, the person who used language particularly that was possibly offensive. When I would look out there and I would practice not judging, because the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment, isn't it? It's just a judgment. It's just a judgment. And if we want to end violence in our lives and in our society, we have to learn to change our thoughts. Remember the dandelions? When I was growing up out in Michigan, we had these dandelions. The dandelions would have, at a certain time of the year, they would get all these little fuzz balls at the top of them. The yellow little flower part. I always liked the dandelions. I thought they were really beautiful. And then they have these little fuzz balls. Now imagine if you want to end the problem of dandelions on your lawn, and you see them all out there with all their little fuzz balls. So you go out there and you take a shovel and you turn it upside down and you start smacking all of the dandelions like this. And what do you do when you use violence to attempt to end the presence of these dandelions, which are problems for you on your lawn? Is they all scatter, and then in the spring, guess what you got? You got more. You got new generations of dandelions. There's such a lesson in that, isn't there? There's a great lesson that when we use violence as a means to resolve our disputes, whether it's individually with each other, or whether it's in countries, or whether it's in communities, whenever it is that we resort to that kind of not seeing myself in others, and out of this kind of a consciousness will emerge those people who will ultimately begin to get this. Because if we don't get it, like if we don't really get it, civilization as we know it will not survive. It will not survive. We have to learn that the people that we call enemies, no matter how horrendous they may behave toward us, there is still something of us in all of them. And we can figure out a way. Yes, we of course have to defend ourselves, and yes, we don't allow people to push us, or all of those kinds of things, but at a deeper and a higher level, Lao Tzu was asking us to go within and find that place of peace and try to reach out to that. and help someone to make a U-turn, those people can be reached because they have the anchor of the universe located within them. In verse 25 of the Tao it says, thus to know humanity, understand earth. To know earth, understand heaven, which is where earth came from. To know the way, understand the great within yourself. Within yourself. Look within and see it. Now, every single person watching this program will have conflicts with somebody in their life on a fairly regular basis. Especially if you're in a marriage or in a partnership of some kind. Certainly if you have children, you're going to have conflicts. Now think about what you do when you have a conflict and that conflict comes to an end. The conflict is over. You've expressed your opinion, you may have yelled at each other, you may have screamed at each other, you may not have understood each other, but it's over now. How do you end the conflict? Lao Tzu says, the person of Tao will eliminate all of the pain, all of the stress, all of the anger, all of the hatred, if they decide to end the conflict with love. Just be the one who ends the silence by saying, we don't agree, but I love you. And it's all over. You have moved a person from staying in the world of the 10,000 things into the world of God, into the world of Source, because the Source has no violence in it. It creates endless numbers of flowers and beings and creations without using any force at all. There's no force there. Here's one of my teachers who lived in Bombay, which is now Mumbai in India. His name was Nisargadatta Maharaj. He said, wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And in between the two, my life moves. In between the two. The ability to take a conflict and to end it with love is one of the most powerful things that you can do. It has been a great lesson for me. When we have a conflict, what we do is I will be the person that will pick up that phone. You can be certain of it. I will end that conflict with love. And guess what that does to the conflict? It's over. It's over. You can't pick a fight with someone who just doesn't want to fight anymore, who just sends you love. So I want to summarize some of these thoughts, and there are so many. Change your thoughts based upon the wisdom of the Tao, and your life will change. There's many principles to live by in the Tao. First, remind yourself that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Bring happiness to all that you do. You accomplish much by trying less. It's so inconsistent, isn't it, with what we lived in the Western world. But the less you try, when I go out and swim in the ocean, and I do it almost every day, I try to do between 30 minutes and an hour every day, being out there in that ocean. And I just get out there, and if I try less, my arms just seem to know what to do, and the breathing just all works, and I can swim all day. As soon as I try, as soon as I struggle, as soon as I try, the minute that I move myself into trying, it's like if I were to take this little cap here and drop it right there and say, I'm going to try to pick this up. I'm going to try to pick this up. This is what Lao Tzu was speaking about. So all of this, I'm trying, I'm really trying. All of this is called, in reality, not picking it up. That's what that's called, not picking it up. But when I just get easy and do less. See yourself, the Tao says, in everyone you encounter. A great lesson. Every single being, especially the ones that we read about who we're told are our enemies. See yourself in them. Know that whoever they are, wherever they live, they want what we want. They want what I want. They want to be at peace. They don't want to be always struggling. They don't want to be sick. They just want to be loved. whoever they are. I know the skepticism of that. It's like, yes, but, all of the yes, buts. But if they got it too, Lao Tzu wasn't speaking to, well, some are going to get this and some probably won't. He was speaking to all of us. Trust in others, the Tao says, to know what's best for themselves. Trust in that. Trust in the pliability, the flexibility of your babies. God, those little babies, they're so great when they're like, 2 weeks old. You can take their foot, put it behind their neck, stick it around here like this, put it in their mouth. They're so flexible. I mean, you can do anything. You pick them up, you turn them upside down. You watch them when they're starting to learn to walk. And they run, crash, they go down into the walls and all of this. And you think, oh my God, this kid will never walk again. Up they go, and they don't. Trust in their flexibility. Live without attachment and be generous. Be strong by bending. By bending. We need to learn this in our lives. We need to learn this in the world. It's not so important to be right. It's so much more important when you have a choice to be right or to be kind. Always pick kind. Always pick kind. Practice radical humility. Live low. Live low like the ocean. Stay low. And all the streams will come to it. That's why it's so powerful, because it doesn't lord anything over anyone. And rather than looking for miracles, see everything as miraculous. Everything in your life. There was a man who had a Tao experience, what I call a quantum moment. His name was John Newton. He lived back in the beginning of the 18th century. And he was crossing the ocean. He was a slave trader. He had a ship full of human cargo that he was going to trade into slavery, in the most hideous practice that was so common at that time in our history. And in the middle of a storm, on his way over there with all of these people, he was 22 years old or 23 years old. And he thought he was going to die, and he thought it was like he must have hit a hurricane or something out there that was before satellites could warn people. And while he thought he was in that state of dying, he took out a pencil and a paper, and he wrote on the back of an envelope, he wrote, "I once was lost, and now I'm found." And it was grace. It was grace that taught my heart to feel. It was grace that brought me home. And when the storm was over, he had a moment. He reconnected to his source. Anybody out there can reconnect to the source, to the Tao, and become a being of Tao. Remember, it's a return trip. And you can make that return trip while you're alive. Remember the parrot. He knows much more than we did. And he returned back to Africa, and he released the slaves, it is said. And for the next 55 years of his life, he shifted and became the most ardent spokesman as an abolitionist to abolish that hideous practice of slavery. That's what he devoted his life to it. A former slave, it's like going from Saul to Paul, from being a person who crucifies and murders Christians to being the author of a big portion of the New Testament as St. Paul. In a moment, it's possible for any of us. And there's a lady who I think has one of the great voices on this planet today. Her name is Cecilia, and she has been traveling with me. She's from Norway. She has sung at conventions and places that I have been. She sings, we call her the nightingale, don't we? She's an angel. She sings like an angel. And she's accompanied by the whales. These whales, these beautiful creatures who are in my front yard every morning on Maui, the humpbacks, who have these beautiful tails that flash and flash, and some days I'll be walking along the beach and I will hear someone say, "Honey," this guy was having on a honeymoon there, and he said, "Honey, come on in. You can hear the whales singing, they're all singing." And she's going, I don't think I want to get my feet wet, and I don't think I get my hair wet. And he said, "No, but you can hear them." And I flew into there with my clothes on and went underneath, and I stayed under there for like an hour, up and down, listening to these sounds of the whales, these beautiful creatures in nature, these natural beings who I feel so connected to and so a part of. And she sings accompanied by the whales. Now, getting those whales into the sound booths and getting the earphones on, very, very difficult. You got to really appreciate what we did here to bring this to you. Right? And here she is. Her name is Cecilia. She sings Amazing Grace, accompanied by the whales. One of my truly favorite people and greatest singers I've known. Cecilia? Thank you. Namaste. I want to close this beautiful presentation on the Tao, Cecilia, with a poem that was written by a woman. Her name is Naomi Long Madgett. She's from Detroit, went to Wayne State University. She was named the Poet Laureate of Detroit, an acclaimed African-American poet. Listen to these words. It sums up all that I've been saying. I wouldn't coax the plant if I were you. Such watchful nurturing may do it harm. Let the soil rest from so much digging and wait until it's dry before you water it. The leaf's inclined to find its own direction. Give it a chance to seek the sunlight for itself. Much growth is stunted by too careful prodding, too eager tenderness. The things we love, we have to learn to leave alone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Everything, remember, has a dharma. Every creature, every rose, and every human being has a dharma. You're already fulfilling it physically. You're already in the bodies that you were intended to be in. Remember what I said before, it is not about where you are, it's about what direction you're headed. And as long as you know you're heading in the direction of staying here in meaning. Now, this concept of a calling, I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Inspiration, in Spirit, and the subtitle is called Your Ultimate Calling. So I'm going to introduce a word here to help you to identify your calling. And that word is passion. And it doesn't make any difference to me whether that passion has anything to do with making a living, or it's a part of the DOT, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. What is it that you find passion about? And the only condition I place on it is that it is in alignment with God or with your source. All right? So that your passion, if your passion is about killing other people, for example, if your passion is about stealing, if your passion is about, I often said that there's two ways to have the tallest building in town. One of the ways to have the tallest building in town, always, is to go around and knock down anybody else's building when they start getting taller than yours. So as soon as they get up, if you're at the 44 floors and they get to 43, 44, you just go over and you put some explosives in there and you just blow it up. And you say, I have the tallest building in town. And this is, by the way, our collective ego. This is what we do in our society and in our world, and which is about, if you really want to know my passion and my calling, it's about shifting the entire consciousness of this planet before I leave it. And that's why the film titled The Shift is so significant to me, because I know that if I can get 10 million people to watch that film, The Shift, if I can get 10 million people in America and Canada to watch that film, that we reach something called pi, 3.1416, remember? And if you can get 3.1416% of a population to align, the rest of it's called a critical mass in physics. you reach what is called phase transition. And if you align enough people or electrons or subatomic particles up and align them in a certain way in an energy field, and you reach what they call the 100th monkey, when you reach that point, all the rest of the electrons or the people in that energy field begin to align as well. And we have aligned ourselves collectively with a consciousness that allows for people to knock down other people's buildings. The other way to have the tallest building in town is to always work on your own building and not be concerned with anybody else's building or what anyone else out there is doing or being consumed with trying to compete with or win or defend. To listen to your calling. So your calling is the thing within you that has your attention, that has your passionate attention. And it doesn't make any difference whether it makes sense to anybody else. It's the thing that you feel inside of you that you're here for. It's Mr. Holland in Mr. Holland's opus. And here's the secret. Here's the thing that I learned. That it's the presence of the passion. That when you have the presence of the passion within you for what it is that you feel is your calling, everything else will take care of itself. That is an indication that you have God within you and guiding you. The word enthusiasm and theos, iasm, translates to the God within in Greek. The God within. When you are enthusiastic about something, anything, when you have that kind of internal knowing that this is what I'm doing. And sometimes you have to, that Shakespeare's, he wasn't just a great writer, he was an incredible philosopher. Probably the most famous lines from Shakespeare are from Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. And that's a very profound question. But what follows that is much more profound. He said, after to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the minds of men to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and thus by opposing end them. You have to ask the question, and that's what this program is about, and that's what the movie is about, and that's what the book is about, and that's what all of it is about. To be or not to be. Am I going to be who I came into this world to be, and there's something inside of me that has always been calling me to it? Or am I going to allow the slings and arrows of an outrageous fortune that has been imposed upon me by others to dictate my dharma? That's really the question. And it's a question that you can answer and respond to and live with. God's one and only voice's silence means that God is that which is indivisible. There is no place that God is not. And you can't divide God up and say that God is on this side or God is on that side. I've often said that God isn't doing anything different now than God was doing an hour ago or 100 years ago. And God isn't doing anything different now than he will be doing 1,000 years from now. God is exclusively here and now, not elsewhere, not in heaven someplace apart from us, but here, now, and indivisible. And the word indivisible is very important, because that which is everywhere and cannot be separated or carved up is something that we have a great deal of difficulty in the world of the physical form experiencing and understanding. Because our world, the world of you listening here, is a world of dichotomies. It's a world of paradoxes. We divide everything up. And dichotomies are just our way of being. We divide everything in the world up. The only reason we know that something called darkness exists is because of light. If there was nothing called light, we wouldn't know anything called darkness. The only reason we have a concept called up is because we have something of its reverse called down. You've never seen a person with a front who doesn't have a back. You've never seen a person with an outside who doesn't have an inside. We divide everything. Everything is in the world of the divisible. In the Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about transcending the dichotomies, figuring out a way to get past the up-down, the male-female, the good-bad, the right-wrong, the old, the new, the alive and the dead. Everything has its dichotomy. You can always find its opposites. In fact, that's how the symbolism of language is created, through having opposites. We don't know about oneness in the physical world. Everything has its counterpart, its dichotomy, except for silence. Silence is the only experience that is the same as God. It is indivisible. You take silence, and we'll have some right now, and now let's just cut that in half. And what do we have? More silence. Let's take what we've cut in half and cut it in half again and again. And endlessly you attempt to divide into a dichotomy, silence, but you can never do it, because silence is indivisible. And silence is God's one and only voice. When you go into silence, you go into the place where you make conscious contact with God, whatever it is that God means to you. You make conscious contact with that omnipotent, omniscient force in the world, that omnipresence of God. And the reason I say that it's not crowded along the extra mile is because the mile that most people are on is a very, very noisy mile. And I encourage young people to become more comfortable with silence. We live in a world of bulldozers and leaf blowers and trucks that make endless amounts of noise and chatter. And constantly, I have a home, a place a retreat that I go to frequently on Maui. And oftentimes I will walk in the morning and they're in a big building project in Maui. And I'll go past one building after another and start to count the noisemakers, as all of these machines and all of these people who are trying to make the place look so pristine and so beautiful and so landscaped, instead of just letting it grow, just letting it be. Silence and God are one because you can't divide either one of them. Okay? So that going to silence as frequently as you can, and understanding that out of silence, everything is created. The words that you are listening to right now as I speak emerge from silence. That silence is the source. And it's the source that is what we want to make conscious contact with. Like the source of all light is the sun. And the only reason we know about light is because of something called darkness. But when you go to the source can't be divided.